Our story begins with a sinister cult performing some sort of ritual. Around them, bizarre creatures observe. However, some of them are struck by a group of warriors who have just arrived. The Sword Lord Ray Chong tells the others, "I will lead the way." With him is Jort Billmeyer, the Gravedigger, and also Maria Jagger, the Saint. She tells the others, "We need to stop the summoning ritual." But a warning is issued stating, "It's too late. The tier of the tower is drastically changing, and a new raid objective for the tower has been created." Everyone present sees that the boss of the 5th season, named Lord of Pestilence, has appeared. Now their objective is to defeat this boss. But this is no easy task, as the boss defeats many of the surrounding warriors. The Saint, however, doesn't give up. She advances despite knowing the difficulties. Her friends witness the defeat of many before the enemy until Ray Chong panics and runs away, saying, "I don't want to die." But the boss doesn't want to let anyone escape. Soon, he performs an attack directed at the Sword Lord, which ends up hitting several of them. In the midst of this confusion, a new warrior appears. He is the protagonist and is soon recognized by the others. As the famous Hero King, as soon as he arrives, he heads toward the enemy. The boss attacks him without hesitation, but the protagonist manages to dodge the attack. This thrills the enemy, and right after this, they clash. The battle between the two causes huge destruction in the area. The Saint and the others are amazed by this. The boss asks the hero, "Are you really going to attack alone? Humanity's hope is all on you." He continues, "Your defeat will be lonely, drowned in the sea of pestilence where nobody can reach or help you." But the hero replies, "I can't let others see all my powers. I was quite concerned about what to do." Soon, the enemy realizes his adversary had been hiding his game. He doesn't even have time to react. Then, a great lightning attack strikes him. The remaining warriors, still alive, witness what just happened up close. Upon seeing the Hero King triumphant, they realize they have managed to defeat the enemy. With the fall of the Lord of Pestilence, they prevented the world's end once more. In addition to gaining several attributes, the system alerts that for player Kang Yoosung, who killed the boss, a legendary equipment piece will be made available. And with that, the whole world once again managed to extend its lifespan by 1 year. The #1 player, ranking in all 4 seasons, ranked first in the tower raid, level, equipment, skill, and conquest points, considered the king of heroes, Kang Yoosung. He appears everywhere, even on TV. A little girl is super happy to see him as she's a super fan. Not only her, but many others are fans of the hero who've saved the world several times. At the heroes meeting, the president asked Kang Yoosung to say a few words to everyone. He doesn't seem interested in going along with the idea. However, Maria Jagger insists, saying he should speak, even if he doesn't want to, claiming that it is a live broadcast. They are in the conference room in Geneva at the UN, where the top 10 players of this season are gathered. Kang is pointed out as the one who heroically saved the world and risked his life. But he says, "I am not a hero. I only did this for money," shocking everyone with this answer, including Maria Jagger, who doesn't know where it put her face. The so-called hero by everyone claims that this has been over for him for a long time. One day, the world suddenly became again. In the cities and streets of nations around the world, large and small towers regenerated and covered the sky. After a few days, monsters began to spread out of the towers and indiscriminately massacre people. With all this barbarism spreading, everyone thought the end of the world was coming. But in the midst of that pandemonium, a light at the end of the tunnel appeared. Players showed up to combat the evil. They hunted the monsters tirelessly and did everything they could to help people. As a result, the rules of a new world were announced. Tower Break, the phenomenon where monsters emerged from the towers, could be prevented, but only if the tower was attacked within a specific time frame. Therefore, players who possessed superhuman powers and could attack the towers began to be seen as the world's heroes. When the Hero King's comment was seen by many, it became a controversial topic. He vented publicly in the most sincere and shameless way, so it could not have been any different. In the player forums, discussions about it heated up. The player community of the country, which naturally formed due to the world turning into a game, became a place where information about each raid was shared and where players could trade items. The Hero King himself visited the forums anonymously until he almost got discovered due to a mishap. He stepped away from the computer for a moment to breathe some fresh air, but he noticed that outside his apartment, a crowd was watching him. With that, he could no longer leave his house without being approached by journalists. They surrounded him and bombarded him with questions about his last public speech. Kang, one of the reporters, asked, "What do you think about the state of entertainment these days?" Kang paused for a moment before replying, "Celebrities on TV are drunkards causing trouble. Do they even know how to do anything? Because of that, I want to pay back with good entertainment." The reporters didn't understand what Kang meant until they started to feel something strange. A large tremor rumbled through the ground. The hero system then alerted, "The next season is about to begin. The tower structure is currently being created. It continued. Players can enter the appropriate towers after reading the information at the tower's ground floor gate. As the break approaches, the system said the floating tower will descend closer to the ground. Pay attention to the height of the tower. Attack the tower and protect the world from its destruction. Kang Yoosung was the only one who wasn't worried. He handed out some of his pamphlets to the reporters and walked away. After that, he arrived at his destination and mentions there are no rats at all, claiming that, as expected, the first day of the season is calm. His system alerts him that most of the monarchs are happy to see the clown monarch's contractor. The Iron Monarch is laughing merrily and gave his blessing to the one who abandoned his sword. The Blizzard Monarch is laughing and gave her blessing to the one who brought the mirror. Kane tells them to keep laughing. Meanwhile, his system alerts that his fencing aptitude increased, and so did his magic. These actions had meaning this time, just like the day at the UN Hall. To get rewards from transcendent kings who call themselves monarchs and watch players like Kang Yoosung. Next, the system alerts that the Golden Legends monarch is laughing hysterically and gave his blessing to the one who chooses legends. This blessing has several benefits. Therefore, Kang Yoosung wants to get them all at once. His system alerts that the one who chooses legends has a strong influence on the player's G. After that, he realizes he obtained legendary equipment called the Black Cloak with a golden cross. It radiates fanaticism with incredible characteristics. Kang Yoosung thinks he now has a legendary defensive item, the heroic rank skill and a heroic rank artifact. With that, he is more than ready to enter the tower. His system alerts that the Golden Legends monarch withdrew his blessing from the one who chose legends and instead blessed his t-shirt business. After Kang Yoosung enters the tower, he immediately encounters some enemies. The Kerna Tower is inhabited by the Moon Blood Orc species, and his goal is to defeat the Orc boss on the highest floor. Then, Kang Yoosung wonders if he should test his heroic rank skill now. With the amazing attributes of the skill, he triggers the Frozen Sword and even increases his ice compatibility. This grants him an additional effect, Cold Breath. Kang Yoosung thanks the Blizzard Monarch for this and launches an attack with his new skill. As he attacks, he virtually conjures ice storms against the orcs, freezing many of them. Even though they outnumber him, the enemies cannot fight the protagonist head-on. After freezing everyone, he advances. Not only that, but his system alerts him about the rewards he has obtained. Kang Yoosung quickly clears the first floor with flying colors and wonders if he should save the world again. The protagonist's system alerts that he has reached the second floor. But when he arrives, he is surprised. A horde of orcs is setting up camp. One of them senses a strange presence and announces that the warrior is here. He will take us to Valhalla. Soon they will fight with honor and die. The protagonist replies, "Just wait, I'll send you straight to paradise." Sometime later, the fight is already over. He reaches the fourth floor, pleased with leveling up. However, he finds it a bit tough that there aren't any floors for rest. Amidst his thoughts, a system alert informs him that the Sei of War Guards are blocking the way to the boss room. He thinks this is a perfect way to draw everyone in and face the elite monster that I am. His system then informs him that the Steel King blesses the Song of War Guards. The orcs feel this blessing and rev up for the fight, chanting, "Valhalla is waiting for us. Who'll pursue the warrior that will lead us there?" They chant the anthem of blood and steel for the Steel King. The protagonist mutters, "My enemies didn't even let me breathe." However, he doesn't seem saddened by this. Instead, he attacks. In the midst of the fight, he notices something different. One of the enemies advances toward him with fury, forcing him to retreat for a brief moment. Yet, he does not stop fighting and keeps attacking. However, he realizes that his damage is not enough. If the enemy is an elite warrior, he must be resistant to ice. He pulls back, thinking of a better strategy. He mutters to himself, "I need to strike a sure fatal blow, but I lack the right skill for it right now." With his current specifications and equipment, he is practically in the semi-final class. The icing on the cake is the forging of the Frozen Sword, a heroic ranking skill, and also a heroic artifact. The protagonist opens his inventory, but he's uncertain if he can use this item. The system warns him that there is a risk if he does. It states that those who do not act cannot go to Valhalla. Without further delay, they throw their axes. The protagonist says it's no time to hesitate and activates his artifact, called Frozen Heart. Through this, the essence of powerful ice magic is detected, and the ice effect of the equipped skill cards is reinforced. Kang wonders, why settle for less when you can have a goldmine of items? The enemies shout, "War is war," and attack the protagonist with all their might. But what they didn't expect was that their adversary would use an armor of ice. Not only that, but the protagonist's strength had grown, enabling him to overcome his opponents and level up. Kang was now far more powerful. With his ice sword, he blocked every strike, slowing his foes' movements and even damaging some of their weapons. At this point, he fought without pause, gaining a level after each victory. The orcs, clearly displeased, launched wave after wave of attacks, but Kang met them head-on, forcing them back with his full strength. Now he could summon more than one ice weapon at a time. One enemy noticed this, but before he could react, he was brought down like the others. Kang's speed was so great that his opponents could barely follow his movements. This floor is cleared. The stats were wrong, the protagonist said. Seeing only one orb remaining, he decided to end the fight. With that, he defeated the last of them and leveled up once again. The system announced that he would receive a random skill card pack as a reward, along with 1,000 conquest points. Looking over the card he obtained, he saw it was a new skill called Street AB. He wasn't particularly impressed, but remarked, better than nothing. And as he equipped the skill, he notices that its effects have significantly increased. With that, he moves on to the next floor and encounters a girl who is surprised that he's still alive. The protagonist is apologetic for not living up to her expectations. However, the girl says, that's good, as you can only sell items while alive. She explains that she's responsible for the creation of the Mechanical Equipment King, an autonomous vendor of sorts, and tells the protagonist to use everything he's collected before he dies. He then asks to see the item list. The girl claims if you buy a pack of cards, a legendary one will definitely appear. He states that he believes her, but first purchases a speed potion and a fire potion. The girl insists that he buys the pack of cards. The protagonist simply ignores her and leaves. After that, he reaches the floor of the final boss, who asks, is it time for war yet? The boss tells the protagonist to fight with honor and die. The boss attacks him, and Kang uses a magical shield for protection. Kang wonders if he had been fighting dwarves and orcs all this time. After that, he throws a fire potion, setting the enemy completely on fire, but that is not enough to defeat E10. As amidst the flames, the boss manages to escape. However, the protagonist states it's not over yet. With the ice blows of his blade, he attacks, piercing the boss's body and killing him with just one blow. After that, the protagonist says, with the blessing, even a normal skill becomes useful. But then, he realizes it's not over yet. The enemy stands up, and the system alerts that he has activated his Berserk ability. The protagonist mutters, this game is not fun. It's too easy. The final boss returns and promises to end the protagonist. The protagonist, even more outraged, says the shockwave alone inflicts too much damage. It'll defeat me if I get hit by it. But that's if I actually get hit. Soon after, the enemy attacks, but with his agility, the protagonist dodges. Incessantly, the enemy strikes at him, but Kang dodges all. Meanwhile, the protagonist was counting the seconds, and as soon as the countdown ends, he says, it's time. With that, he uses the other potion he had previously bought and cleans the boss's floor. His system alerts him of victory and states that he received a package of cards as a reward. Besides being the first to defeat that tower, the protagonist comments that it's scary how things have been going so well so far. Upon opening his reward, he says, this is not the best I could get. Even so, he wants to check what he won. The first card is a very common one, making him realize that it was just what he expected. Judging this card, he decides it's complete junk. After a while, he heads to the tower of the demon-worshipping imps. The enemies soon notice his presence and join forces to defeat him. The protagonist waits for them all to approach, then performs an ice attack, hitting as many enemies as possible. He has fun doing it, as his intention is just to level up his skills. After defeating this wave of enemies, a new one begins. This time, a larger number of them appears, but for the protagonist, this is nothing. He tells the enemies, I'll be able to get through all of you without difficulty. Just as he says it, he does. With his ice skills, he defeats all the enemies with ease. Not only that, but he also boosts the level of his ice skills until suddenly, the system alerts that the tower boss has appeared. The heretic imp wants to honor the Demon King by spilling his adversary's blood. Soon, the leader tells his faithful followers to hurry up and move in the protagonist's direction, but as they do, they are quickly defeated. Kang's ice magic is much stronger than the enemy attacks. The protagonist's system alerts that the icy status effect was applied to the tower boss. With that, Kang claims, the enemy appeared just in time for me to test something. The system reveals that the glacial synergy reinforcement effect increased the number and type of weapons created. Additionally, with that, the protagonist has a greater number of chilling weapons that he can create. Soon, he decides to test this hypothesis. He creates several ice spears and throws them towards the remaining enemies. The imps, who were already at a disadvantage, are now merely frozen punching bags. Kang shows no mercy to his enemies. After defeating all of them, he cleans the tower entirely and earns some bonuses, including an equipment ticket. But since he already has a legendary one, this now becomes useless. The protagonist notes that the frozen blade apparently doesn't get any weaker, even if he splits it into multiple pieces. For now, he doesn't feel any difference with 8 of them, until the system tells him to greet his shadow. One of the tower factions shows great interest in his performance. The system explains to him in detail what this organization is about. Then he meets the Dark Council. The person responsible for this council says, "We remembered you. Would you like to meet your shadow again and join our whispers?" Kang thinks this isn't bad at all. He responds, "I would really like to join you now, but there are a bunch of other factions desperately trying to put an end to the Dark Council." Their leader says, "The veil will cover you too. Have you already forgotten the dark power?" "Far from it," the protagonist replies. "I only brought it up because I know well how that power works." He thinks it's hard to get what you want just with words. Even so, he says, "I want a shadow beast. If you provide one for me, then you might as well add a rare dark element ability card." The shadow leader tells the protagonist, "Do not summon your own existence. Your existence as a mortal in this world is transient." Thus, the protagonist says, "I have no chance of working with you. We will never meet again because I have done so." So much for everyone. And they don't even want to reciprocate. However, the shadow leader doesn't let him leave. Even unwillingly, he fulfills the protagonist's wish. Therefore, Kang receives a message from his system informing him that he has acquired a shadow beast. In addition, he has earned a special achievement for adopting a cat and even gained 100,000 achievement points. The protagonist is getting used to this, but that was just one of his requests. He also demanded a rare shadow skill card. So after getting the card he requested, Kang agrees to join the Dark Council. In this way, his affinity with the faction increases. After leaving there, the protagonist imagines that this season will be great. He thinks he should continue making progress while everything is going well. Or perhaps he should stop now while he's feeling great and start adjusting his condition. Until, amidst these thoughts, someone calls him. Half-heartedly, the protagonist already wonders what might come next. Several reporters appear to interview him. They've heard of his latest achievements. However, the protagonist is tired and only gives evasive answers. The journalists insist trying to get some information from him, asking questions about his latest actions. They even mention that this season's race is heated. Kang asks, "How many people were there?" They say that apparently 5 veterans from the Chinese Party Guild, led by the Swordmaster, were involved. However, 4 players were killed during the attack. The protagonist says this guy is more of a shield master since he used human shields. The reporters ask with that comment, "Are you trying to provoke a possible adversary?" Kang asks, "How many people was this guy with?" Someone answers he was alone. The protagonist says this warrior must have been full of vigor from the first day. He secretly thinks it makes no sense to enter the race from the start. Everyone knows the saint is collecting skills and items first, and also seems the gravedigger isn't going to participate in the game at this time. Apparently, he plans to accumulate tier 4 items. With that, the reporters ask what the protagonist thinks about this. He replies, "I simply think that warrior is crazy." In this way, they understand that the protagonist is not going to participate in the race with the Swordmaster, but he says he's also crazy. "If I had to choose between winning or losing, I'd pick losing and a tick." He should try to be the one who wins. Finally, he asked if there is anyone who can help him reach the tier 5 tower. After a while, the protagonist finds himself alone. He says there is only one thing that holds back the glory of victory. Even seeing that many bet on his victory for him, this has gone beyond the level of a battle for pride. He knows that the player who must already be inside is the Swordmaster, and that he is willing to play for real. After deciding to enter the tower, the system passes on a mission summary: the Cavalus Empire or the Rhodia Kingdom. Kang must fight for whichever cause he finds more just. He realizes that the communists are fighting for imperialism, and even if he had to choose, it would be the kingdom anyway, because in this game, the disadvantaged side apparently gets the best rewards. Thus, he chooses the kingdom of Rhodia and heads to the palace fountain. When he gets there, those present notice that a player has arrived and are overjoyed at having him there, claiming that the visitor appeared to save them. However, the protagonist does not like what he sees in the strategic planning room. Realizing the way they are dressed, he concludes that the battle is a sneer. As he approaches, he asks who is in charge, but that there is no response from them. Then a man appears saying that the visitor is being insolent. He asks, "Can you not abide by the royal laws in front of Lord Muda Dusham, commander of this place, heir to the royal family and leader of the Duchem Marquisate?" Kang simply asks the leader, "Do you think you're going to win the battle?" The leader responds affirmatively, despite resources being scarce. He claims, "There are no limits to my mental strength." He also adds, "The men of my kingdom possess the limitless mentality of hundreds of ordinary men." The protagonist cannot bear to hear such nonsense any longer. He strikes the leader with a punch, declaring, "I am the one who will give orders around here from now on." The men seem quite satisfied with this. They were not happy with the former leader. After the meeting, the protagonist teased he has recruited about 5,000 commoners for the infantry. Among these, the number of people who know how to use a bow is approximately 900, an overwhelming difference compared to the presence of Empire soldiers. The only upside in this series of misfortunes is that, in this world, there are no hard feelings or magic, and that Swordmaster is not a player who only relies on brute force. He is the apostle of the Iron Monarch. Generally, a standard player can have a contract with only one monarch. Only this one can give rewards. The protagonist is a special case as he gets rewarded by several monarchs. This is due to the clown monarch, who turned him into this kind of player. On the other hand, a monarch can have multiple players, but there's only one player who holds the title of apostle and is favored by their monarch. A monarch goes all out to help the apostle, but of course there are restrictions. For the Swordmaster, abilities related to the Iron Monarch cannot be primarily used in an attack. For this reason, the protagonist doesn't find this fight that bad, but he realizes that the pressure on the soldiers from there will be different. You never really know how much of the world inside the tower can be considered real. Whether these people are alive or simply virtual beings that exist in the tower, it's impossible to find out. Either way, there's nothing to be done about it. He just wants to find a way to lift the soldiers' morale. Just before the day of the battle, the leader of the soldiers announces that a great visitor has come to the kingdom of Rhodia. Moreover, Muda Duchamp was removed from his position as commander, and the player himself would now lead the forces. Soon, the soldiers realized that the ineffective former leader had been replaced, and they took it as very good news. That alone was enough to boost morale, making Kang realize he had worried for nothing. But then he sensed a shift in behavior. A soldier reported that the Empire had launched an attack. The archers immediately prepared and began firing arrows toward the enemy. One archer said the Imperial army's offense is strong because they're pressing the front gates. If we can contain them, it would break their advantage. The protagonist said Dark Beast is too much of a name. We should call it Blackie instead. Standing beside Blackie, he told the creature, "Show them what you can do." The enemies murmured, "What is that?" as they spotted a large dark shape on the castle walls. Their leader warned, no matter what happens, we must hold formation, though he too noticed something unusual. Before he could react, Blackie surged forward, throwing the enemy ranks into disarray. The Imperial soldiers began to withdraw under the sudden assault. Their leader, Peter, ordered, "Forget the castle walls, fall back." But before they could do this, everyone was frozen. Kang says that Blackie was feeling quite hungry, and that now was the time to eat. Thus, the dark creature devoured everything in its path. The rest of the enemy army battled against the men of Rhodia. While this was happening, the protagonist attacked from a distance atop the wall until he realized the Swordmaster wasn't even there. He muttered, "A player showing their presence is a double-edged sword. It lifts the spirits of their allies, but at the same time, it exposes their location to enemy players." But it wasn't a life or death fight. Like every other game, there were rules within the tower. If one loses to the other, they just get expelled from the tower, and the attack is deemed a failure. Inside the tower, a player can't kill another one, but the tower can kill him. The protagonist believed he wouldn't die in the tower, but that didn't mean it was okay to lose there. He started to understand the opponent's game. His allied forces had their morale boosted, but that didn't guarantee a victory. A while later, the fight was about to end, but the opponent still hadn't shown up. Soon, the protagonist began to wonder if the enemy would appear after everyone had been killed. Until something unexpected occurs. The swords of the dead soldiers begin to move. The Rhodian army does not know why. Unlike the protagonist, who claims that this is a move by the adversary player, he wonders where the opponent obtained a heroic rank skill card. He deduces it may have just been luck, or even that the monarch himself granted this ability. Kang is attacked, but dodges. Meanwhile, he thinks his adversary has been preparing all this time. He claims he too was not messing around, just waiting to be attacked. "It's too late for you to act," he says. "My level up is complete." Next, more enemy soldiers appear, and the protagonist realizes he is the target. In this way, the game is turned on the battlefield. However, he asserts, "This won't be enough to defeat me." He also says, "The level of sophistication in sword manipulation is inversely proportional to the number of swords." Kang conjures a magic that protects him from enemy swords, claiming, "If you want to defeat me, you'll have to try much harder." After that, he sees something approaching. Soon, he deduces his final adversary has finally joined him. His system alerts that the Archangel's shield reflected the enemy's attack. This triggers a burst of light, blinding the adversary. In a process, the shield is destroyed. Sarcastically, the protagonist asks, "Did you really think sword manipulation would dominate the fortress?" His adversary is left unsure of what to answer. He simply asks, "What do you think winning in this tower means?" The adversary continues, "Even if this fortress falls and all the kingdom's inhabitants die, unless I defeat you, the Empire cannot win." Kang replies, "So you've known this all along, and yet you still chose this side." He pauses, then asks, "Do you really think you'll win?" His opponent responds affirmatively, saying, "A player is a hero, and a hero's duty is to protect the world. A bully who doesn't understand this duty is not worthy of becoming the Hero King." Kang smirks. That's a fine speech, he says. But does this mean your guild members aren't part of the world you're trying to protect? His adversary's anger flares. You will have a beautiful death, he growls. The protagonist grins. I'll live a little longer, he retorts. But tell me, why are you so upset? Then, without warning, they launch into their direct duel, with Aang attacking full force. He claims the other player's talents are shallow and incomplete. The adversary realizes that Kang isn't fighting alone. After dodges Dark Beast, he says the Monarchs are watching this fight and knows the protagonist isn't foolish enough to not fight to win. But Kang says it's not quite like that. He asks, why does it have to be this way? After that, his adversary calls him ignorable. The adversary alleges that Kang is using his words to hit psychological blind spots. However, the player realizes he was completely ignored. Seeing the protagonist leaving, the adversary asks, what are you doing? It is then that the adversary realizes the reason for the protagonist's actions from the beginning. The protagonist had even revealed his presence right away. Unlike him, it wasn't to encourage those who fought by his side, but to attract as many enemies as possible. In this way, the other player grows desperate. He tries to chase the protagonist in an attempt to stop him from acting. In the command room of the Imperial army, the person in charge discusses how to stop the monster they are facing. He gets furious and asks, what is my visitor doing? His men try to calm him down until the protagonist shows up. He says, the way to win a game is not limited to just one way. The men then are astonished to see a player and wonder if their gods have abandoned them. They know they must protect Duke Barmit, but they are no match for the protagonist. Kang defeats them all with ease until someone approaches. The rival player sees the protagonist fighting with his allies and doesn't like it at all. Kang says, I should have stripped the officers of their clothes and hid them among the soldiers. All I need to do is stop the Empire's advance. Sure, your adversary should know that, he adds. With that provocation, the opponent grows furious. Meanwhile, the protagonist's system alerts him that he has completed the siege of the palace. All important leaders have been killed, and the rest have decided to retreat. Even so, the other player still wants revenge, but Kang is just concerned about the reward he will receive after completing the mission. His system shows him his options. Therefore, he ironically thanks his adversary for having provided this, even swearing to death. He scorns the opponent and only worries about rescuing his prize. Then, he chooses the ability called Sword Manipulation, obtaining the Steel Synergy. This grants the effects of cards and skills with the metal attribute greater reinforcement. Your enemy asserts that it's not over yet, but Kang doesn't care. He simply walks out of the game, leaving him talking alone. Outside, he doesn't look as satisfied as in the game. Through his system, a monarch asks him if he wants to be a hero. Kang thinks that around this time, he always dreams of this day and makes the same choice. The monarch warns that he will be the hero of heroes, but for the rest of his life, he won't be understood by anyone. Not only that, but he will become a laughingstock and a joke to others, and the monarch assures that nowhere else will he find something so tragic and comedic. Thus, Kang thinks that this dream has been repeated countless times. This monarch, known as Clown, made a deal with the protagonist, and since then, he has been living his life as predicted. On another day, he wakes up to his cell phone ringing. Upon checking, he realizes he already missed 4 calls. Not only that, but someone is already knocking on his door looking for him. Kang was beginning to wonder why he had such an intense dream, and now wonders why all this noise so early. Upon answering the door, he realizes it is the general manager and questions what such an important person is doing there. He is Park Teshik, known as Master Park, and says that the protagonist got cocky just because he was a bit tough on him. Park is a player in the top 30 rankings who made a deal with the Monarch of Assassins and is better known by the nickname Player Deadly Blade. In addition, he is the general manager of the National Intelligence Agency, working under direct orders from the Blue House. Seeing him up close, Kang says that the manager looks tired and asks, did you also have to run a bit on the first day? Park replies, I don't have time for that. He explains that since the first day of the season, all Warmongers worldwide have been lining up players on the front lines and forming a serenade of destruction. He then questions, why didn't you answer the phone given that the sun rose some time ago? The protagonist simply responds, I was sleeping. Park soon points to Kang and says, your life is very messy. Ironically, he stumbles over some trash and falls. He gets angry and suggests, instead of going around selling t-shirts of the King Hero Kang, you should reassess your way of life. The protagonist is somewhat embarrassed and, judging by the way he lives, Master Park says, you seem more like a son of darkness. He also mentions that Kang has already earned quite a lot and asks why he still eats at the nearest restaurant 3 times a day. Kang replies, I like the food there. Park expresses, it makes me want to try the food there someday. Kang thinks that his story with the manager dates back even before the world turned into a game. The protagonist was already a known player at 15. The alien house where he frequented witnessed his impressive feats, including the manager who was none other than Park Tashik. He thought Kang was an amazing player and even advised him to turn professional. Back then, the protagonist played just for fun, but the manager convinced his parents, volunteered to look after him, and refine his talent. Then one day when Kang turned 18, he was waiting to make his official debut. But before that, the first season happened, the end of peace. Along with this came the first tower break they faced. Kang, like everyone, was super scared. He witnessed up close the horrors that came with it and almost got killed that day by one of the creatures. Fortunately, there was somebody by his side. Manager Park showed up and fought for him. With this, he defeated the creature, giving them the advantage to run away together. However, for the protagonist, his loss was considerable, as on the same day, he lost his parents. Alone in the world, he was desolate. Manager Park became his only hero. Thus, they form a deep friendship that lasts until today. Back to the present moment, Kang asks, "What do you aim to do at my house?" He responds, "I'm here because of the association." The protagonist inquires, "Does the association still want to use me?" KC, the Korean Players Association, is also the only guild in the nation, an absolute organization that administers the players. Park asks, "Do you know the Players Academy Association built last season?" The protagonist asks, "Are you referring to the slave factory?" "That's right," Park says. "Apparently, the first graduation exam will take place within a week, and they want you there." However, he assumes that the protagonist won't go. "I just wanted to let you know," he adds, "you don't need to worry about these things." But his surprised, Kang says, "I will attend. It would be a good idea to look closely at the new players who are going to carry the future of the nation on their shoulders." But he has a condition for going. He wants the association to change the date of the examination to the following day at 5 o'clock in the morning. The next day, with 5 minutes to go before the examination, the academy is already full of the participants. One of the attendees already knows about the protagonist and also that he is assessing them. However, another thinks that anyway, everyone will graduate. He just doesn't like having to do it at 5 in the morning, calling the protagonist arrogant for choosing this time. The president of the ACGA asks Kang what he thinks of his students. The protagonist affirms that they have been carried since the beginning. Lee Sanongo feels a little embarrassed but politely asks the protagonist to evaluate his students carefully. Kane only says that the conditions are those that have already been established. With this, he agrees to test the strength of these rookies. Therefore, the final decision about their graduation will also be up to him. Even noticing a tone of superiority, the president agrees to let the protagonist act as he sees fit. He thinks his plan is perfect since it is still the beginning of the season and the students are also talented. Therefore, even the heroic king will not be able to do as he pleases. But soon after, Leonardo changes his mind. He sees with his own eyes the students he believed to be excellent getting beaten by the protagonist. After defeating everyone, Kang stands in front of the defenseless girl who is already crying over her failure, but the protagonist says you passed. The girl asks, "How?" He answers, "It was pure luck." Kang argues that she was the luckiest of the 12, so she was the only one left. He tells her to remember that luck is everything for a player. He also says, "For now, that's it." He congratulates her on her graduation, then tells them to turn off the cameras. Furious, the director appears and asks, "What's the meaning of this?" The protagonist surprises him and says, "I knew about your intentions from the beginning." He continues, "All the students are relatives of association executives or have strong connections. That's why I concluded I was called here to test their progress and collect data." Kang says the director wants to pick up those rankers who can't maintain their positions, just graduate them, and use them as hunting dogs. With this, he calls the entire organization rotten people. Hearing this makes the president angry. Leonardo asks, "What would an arrogant brat like you understand about this?" Alleging that he is not a hero just because he is called one, he also says that a player is just a weapon for their nation, not only in Korea, but in other countries as well. So what they need in this new world is a war hero. The president says that the protagonist has to understand their situation and cooperate as well. Kane just thinks these people are idiots who don't understand anything. Until then, someone approaches the president and says they have an urgent problem. Upon hearing what it is about, Lee Sanongo becomes very scared. Contrary to the protagonist, who ironically says that the Player Academy will close a year after its launch, a video was leaked exposing some rot within the organization. Kang says that the head of the National Intelligence Division is supporting him. That's why he got this material. Now the president's reputation is ruined and Lee Sanongo is furious with the protagonist. Kang uses his provocation ability and further irritates the president. Through this, his system alerts that the clown was excited about the contractor's actions and decided to reward him. After this, the protagonist leaves the scene. Outside, he thanks his contact and asks if it is okay for the National Intelligence Organization to attack the association this way. He answers yes because the government doesn't like them either. His friend says that the government and the association are always arguing. Kang enjoys this and tells his friend to give him a lift to the Tier 5 tower. Sometime later, the protagonist arrives at the place and his system alerts that a hot and cold journey through the desert awaits him. Soon, he is transported to the mission site. There, some of the inhabitants are being devastated by evil creatures. Seeing this, the protagonist says the appearance of players within the tower's domain is always right on time. Therefore, the players emerge as a kind of savior. In this way, their presence before the natives makes them seem even more legendary. Kang arrives full force, smashing the enemies. Soon, the natives indeed see him as a hope. He says, "You may call me as you wish." They see the protagonist as a sort of light priest, someone sent by God who brought hope. However, Kang has a bad feeling about this. Anyway, he asks if there's any threat beyond these monsters. They say this is the Divine Kingdom's territory. There is no need to worry about a heretic invasion. Besides, it will take 3 days to reach their destiny. The protagonist doesn't like this and thinks he should have rested a bit more before acting impulsively. In any case, he tells the others to rest, affirming that while he's there, the monsters won't be a problem. The men thank the protagonist for offering to stand guard. Kang uses a vitality necklace to increase his life recovery rate. Besides, he decides to open the present granted by his monarch. Through this, he gets a superior rank growth stone. Soon he praises the item, saying that this time he got something decent. But he says he won't need it now and considers storing it for later. Soon after, some giant scorpions advance in his direction. Kang decides to summon Blackie to help him with his dark creature. He fights the enemies. The protagonist says it's a nuisance, but he can't leave everything in the hands of his familiar. In this way, he decides to attack from a distance. Since he has a blade that moves as his thoughts wish, seeing this in practice, he says that this ability is quite useful. Upon defeating the enemies, he levels up as usual, including the sword manipulation skill card, which also levels up. However, he realizes that it's not over yet. More enemies have appeared to face him. This time, it's a sand predator, an adult one at that. Soon, the protagonist concludes that he hasn't slept this night, but he fears not the enemy, for he counts on Blackie to defeat it. While his dark creature does the heavy work, Kang, from afar, attacks with his mind-controlled weapons, piercing the worm in various directions. The protagonist hardly moves at all. After all, there's no need due to his weapons. He defeats the enemy with ease, using his ice abilities. Thus, he also elevates the ice trait's level of his skills. The day dawns, and they begin their journey toward their destination. Upon seeing a fleet of knights, Kang asks, "Are they allies?" One of the men responds, "These are the brave warriors who serve the light god." However, Kang presses on, what were they doing that they didn't help last night? His ally answers, in terms of priority, these knights prioritize protecting their goods. Therefore, under any circumstances, they protect the wagon with the items. The protagonist asks, what is the knights faction? His ally replies, they're the honored knights of the Order of the Bloody Cross. Sarcastically, the protagonist asks, are these knights sheltering a golden calf or something inside the carriage? The knight's leader tells the protagonist, do not pay attention to the carriage. Focus on the task assigned to you and nothing else. With that, Kang realizes that they are knights who use the Aura Heart. They even sent the Light's Apostle there. After that, Kang says, the night has awakened even more of my curiosity about the contents of the carriage. He tries to imagine what's inside. It must be something highly valuable to have so much protection around it. One of his allies is quite embarrassed by the protagonist's audacity, but Kang abruptly pulls him away, for he saw that the ally was about to be hit by an arrow. Unless you want to die, everyone get to the ground, Kang commands. Soon his air attacks are made, they scramble to protect themselves. One of the allies screams, we're being attacked by heretics. He wonders aloud, how dare these heretics enter the Divine Kingdom's territory? In any case, the enemies advance, and the protagonist wonders how the knights will react. The knight's leader tells the others, do not let our goods fall into enemy hands at any cost. Activate the Aura Shield. Kang realizes that, in the end, they don't care about their own companions. They only want to protect the so-called golden calf. Next, he gets a system alert saying to protect the caravan and transport the items safely. Thus, he prepares to fight the enemies and throws attacks from a distance. One of the heretics says, the attacks can't reach us. But notice that the protagonist wasn't aiming at him. He then falls off the horse as the attack came from the ground. After that, Kang appears above them. However, just as he was about to attack, he notices something different on the enemy's face. He realizes that the enemy is, in fact, a desert elf. This changes Kang's plans. Instead of attacking, he is now protecting the elves. But his help is not well received, as the fallen elf gets up and tries to attack him. Kang defends himself and meanwhile asks the elf, what is inside the caravan? The elf thinks he is trying to manipulate him and does not answer. He then tells the others, don't listen to him, shoot mercilessly. Soon, the other elves shoot their arrows, but the protagonist protects the elf and himself with a magical shield. His opponent says, even if I'm captured, I'll say nothing. Kang tells him, don't worry about it. I just want to know what's in the caravan. He needs this information to decide which side to take. He also said that he hadn't defeated them simply because he chose not to. It would not have been difficult for him. Then the protagonist displayed his power, leaving the elves astonished. With all eyes on him, he said, if anyone acts rashly, it would put everyone in danger. He asked again, what is inside the caravan? One of the elves replied, it's not goods, it's Princess Syria. Realizing a princess had been taken, the protagonist told the elf, go back and spread the word that I'm giving you a chance to leave safely. When the elf hesitated, Kane reminded him, step back now, or I can't guarantee everyone's safety. The elf then stood and left with his companions. After that, a knight approached the protagonist and asked, why did you let the opponents leave? Kang answered, I need to confirm something first. Civi moved toward the carriage, an action that went against what the knight had said earlier, prompting his sword be raised to block the way. The knight said, I can't allow anyone near the caravan, even if it's the Apostle of Light. Kang summoned his shadow creature and said, step aside. I'll handle this matter. And with that, he managed to reach the caravan. And upon opening the doors, he asked the person inside if they need help. He comes face to face with the elf princess. She is Syria, princess of the kingdom of Ayub, and is not at all happy to see him. She claims that she does not need the sympathy of a heretic. The protagonist's system warns him about neglecting his duty, alerting him that the Monarch of Light is warning the player of his actions. Kang says, if that is the case, I have no other choice. He defies the system and breaks the chains holding the princess. By doing this, he achieves a hidden feat and earns 300,000 conquest points. Now, the tower's objective has been updated. With that, the difficulty of the mission has increased. The protagonist says the game is over, but claims freedom is incredible. His system says you will pay for challenging the light and warns that one of the tower's forces has turned against him. Then Sentinels of Light appear in the sky. They obey the Monarch of Light and execute his will. On the ground, the leader of the Knights says the Apostle of Light has corrupted you. It doesn't matter if you are a visitor. For now, you are a heretic who defied the light. Kang says the Knights are changing their attitude just because they got some support. But he reassures the princess that she has nothing to fear as he too has support. His system notifies him that he has gained the approval of the Monarch of Shadows for his decision. Soon the lights fade and darkness spreads across the field. The Dark Council grants him a special enhancement called the Curtain of Absolute Darkness. With this, the Knight's vision becomes clouded as the dark veil covers the battlefield. Kang realizes that this choice will bring him a far greater reward than if he had remained on the side of light. In this situation, the Knights are unable to detect the source of the attacks and are gradually neutralized. High above, the Heralds of the Monarch of Light are unable to intervene until one of them decides to use light to open a path. This allows them to see the scene below, witnessing the Knights struggling against the Shroud of Darkness. Immediately, they become furious at the one responsible. But before they can take action, the protagonist strikes first. They are shocked, wondering how a mortal dares to do such a thing. The king's system alerts that the Sentinels of Light and become completely hostile toward him. On the other hand, his standing with the Dark Council faction rises considerably. As a result, he levels up and enhances his proficiency with dark powers. Finally, his system emits a new alert, claiming that an immeasurable number of factions in the tower are observing his actions. The world of the towers and the world within them are not the same. The Knights of the Bloody Cross and the Elves of the Desert are creatures within the tower who make up the internal world. Yet, the Monarchs and their factions are on a level above that. This would be the world of the tower itself. The player is an agent between these two worlds, practically the same as a monarch's forces interfering in the tower. However, players are not mere puppets who follow the will of the monarchs. By understanding things that are beyond the text, the player within the tower can make decisions that go beyond imagination. Just as Kang can predict that he would receive a better reward as a member of the Dark Council if he went against the forces of light. If you have an idea, you cannot hesitate to execute it, because even the monarchs themselves cannot challenge the rules and restrictions that bind them. No matter how much the Light Sentinels detest him for contradicting their monarch, as long as this place is a tier 5 tower, no angel above rank 8 can descend from the heavens. These are the rules of the tower. Therefore, only the heralds who were there attack the protagonist. But due to the darkness, their vision was not very clear. As a result, their attacks ended up hitting their own allied knights. Kang thought they didn't care about their allies. However, the followers of Light themselves were not that different. For the protagonist, it made sense that they needed this end. Anyway, Kang claimed that his vision suddenly became clear. He thought the buff's powers were amazing, but the enemy was quite strong. So first and foremost, he needed to do something before it was too late. Kang moved towards the princess and removed her from the war zone. Next, he called Blackie and handed her the gift he had received earlier to help protect the princess. With this, he used the higher rank Gross Stone on his partner, further boosting the power of the dark creature. The princess saw an attack coming and warned him. Kang, however, didn't need to do anything. Without the princess realizing it, he was protected by the dark creature, which absorbed the attacks coming from the sky and reflected them back. The protagonist thought this was great because his strategy had worked. Unlike him, the enemies claimed that this was futile, saying their blades couldn't hit them. Kang, however, ignored them and moved forward. The Light Heralds prepare to launch another attack until one of them closes in for direct combat with Kang. The protagonist attempts to approach from behind, but the opponent swiftly evades, forcing Kang to come up with a new strategy. He realizes that confronting them head-on causes him to lose the upper hand and wonders if constant movement is truly necessary during the fight. After receiving another wave of attacks, Kang finds the battle more challenging than expected and questions why they remain so fast despite being under a disadvantage. With no other option, he keeps defending and countering until a brief lapse allows the opponent to land a precise strike. Kang notes that their constant movement in the air makes it difficult to bring the battle to a quick end, leading him to consider using his secret weapon. However, one of the heralds declares, "I won't let you do that," causing Kang to hesitate. Suddenly, a powerful hit connects, throwing Kang off balance and rapidly draining his stamina. His system alerts that the Blessing battle test adventure has reached 100%. With a probability of less than 50%, the effect of the Blessing, one who cheats death, was triggered, completely nullifying the incoming attack. Following this, the process of locating the Radiant Sword began. At that moment, the leader of the heralds sensed something was wrong and ordered the others to retreat. But Kang replied, "It's too late for that." He then summoned a large number of mind-controlled swords and sent them toward his opponents, declaring, "It's time to bring this to an end." The heralds were struck and rendered unable to continue the fight. A few attempted to withdraw, but the protagonist quickly closed the distance and neutralized them, bringing the battle to a close. He gained experience and leveled up after the victory. Even so, Kang appeared tired as his supportive effects faded the moment the fight ended. He looked around and noticed that traces of the confrontation were still evident. Just then, his companion arrived. Kang was relieved to see that Blackie was safe, and the princess was unharmed as well. As he approached, she asked, "Why did you abandon your own side and go so far for me?" Kang simply replied that the rewards made it worthwhile. Siri asked, "Do you have no compassion for your own kind? Or are you planning to ask for a reward for saving my life?" The protagonist replied simply, "I have a condition that makes it difficult for me to connect with people." Seeing that the princess seemed unsettled, he apologized, "I'm sorry for not answering your question seriously." A few days later, at the border of the Elven Kingdom of All, they arrived on horseback. Sirius said, "I am truly indebted to you. Thank you for your help." Kang responded, "I only did this because I wanted to receive a reward." The princess then offered him a necklace. His system notified him that he had received the symbol of trust, an accessory of unknown rank and a special item. Although he did not know its true value, it seemed it might be useful one day. Sometime later, the protagonist was traveling by train, arriving at Busan Station at a friend's request. Kang asked, "Did something happen there?" His friend replied, "Not yet, but it will soon. I need you nearby." Natasha, an internationally wanted figure believed to be part of the Black Player faction, was being pursued by the Russian government and was reportedly going to be transported through the port of Busan. She had also begun conquering towers with 4 of her subordinates. In addition, she possessed the legendary skill card Absolute Darkness Curtain. Upon leaving the train, Park asked the protagonist if there weren't any infected there. He replied, "No, I just want a car to pick me up." Park then said, "I just got information about the tower that Ivanova's group entered, so I'll send Kang there." Kang thus learned he would have to face the Zombie Apocalypse Tower, Tier 5. He didn't hesitate to enter, already knowing it would be no ordinary tower, especially given its tier. His system notified him that he must survive against the infected and the tailless secret maintenance squad. The enemy this time was truly unusual, making him question whether zombie was even the right word. Suddenly, Blackie rushed forward without waiting for the protagonist's command. The shadowy creature seemed drawn to something. As it faced the enemy, its energy and excitement surged. Blackie swiftly bypassed the opponent and absorbed its energy, then transformed into a massive whale. Kang realized that consuming the gross stone had truly changed his cat. Once finished, Blackie appeared completely satisfied. At that moment, Natasha Ivanova appeared. She'd been waiting for the protagonist for a long time. She called him the hero of heroes and remarked that someone like Kang would never leave an opponent like her unchecked. Kang said, "I know exactly who Natasha Ivanova is, an associate of the Red Mafia, wanted by the Russian government. You and your subordinates slipped in through the port of Busan. Natasha asked, "Are you planning to hand me over to the authorities?" He replied, "No, but I don't know what makes you so relaxed when standing in front of an adversary." Inwardly, Natasha thought, "Perhaps the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service does not hold me in high regard." Kang continued, "Your small advantages must be tied to members of Zaslan. I suspect they plan to corner me and leave me for the infected." Natasha said, "So you know I'm part of Russian intelligence. Will you still face me?" The protagonist answered, "I'm not here to become a casualty of this outbreak. This is the only way to claim a legendary ability." Ivanova thought to herself, "I was right about him." She then signaled her subordinates to close in. They quickly surrounded him, but Kang skillfully avoided every move. After that, he advanced toward his opponent. Somehow, Natasha still manages to escape, which in a way impresses the protagonist. Now, he has lost track of her in the darkness. Kane realizes that Natasha has slipped away, and immediately he must defend himself from her teeth assault. He counts 3 riflemen and 1 sniper. While evading the incoming attacks, he thinks that this tactic might work once, but not a second time. From what he knows, the debuff from the absolute darkness curtain should affect everyone within it. So he wonders how the enemies are still able to target him. At that moment, his cat approaches. Kane says, "I'll need your help." The cat promptly signals its readiness to assist. Outside, one of the shooters remarks, "His ice shield is too strong. We need another way to break through." Suddenly, the shooter notices the cat, and the situation quickly turns as Blackie closes in, forcing the attackers to retreat. Another warns, "Stay out of the cat's shadow." Inside his shield, the protagonist wonders if they will really manage to get away. He mutters, "It doesn't matter whether they can see the shadow or not." But then, Natasha Ivanova emerges behind him, the cold edge of a blade resting against his neck. She says she might spare him, provided he behaves appropriately. Kang replies, "Only someone truly capable would dare say that to me." Natasha warns him not to underestimate her. She mentions the conquest points he earned after completing the 5th tier tower, adding, "That wasn't an ordinary number." She assumes he cleared the tower in hard mode, but then chose a lighter challenge afterward, just as he did last season. Outside, her subordinates struggle to escape the pursuit of the shadowy cat, but they are not doing well. The protagonist is aware of this and waits for the right moment to act. Soon he asks, "How do you plan to deal with me when everything you see is just an illusion?" Natasha realizes she has been speaking to an illusion all along, and that she has walked right into the protagonist's trap. Kang says, "I knew from the beginning that this wasn't the absolute darkness curtain. It interferes with the opponent's senses, leaving me with just one option, a legendary ability that manipulates the visual information the target perceives. This ability is called Oculus." With her strategy exposed, Natasha freezes for a moment. At that instant, Kang seizes the opening to counter. He says it takes a good scammer to trick someone, but it doesn't seem to be her fault. He also says that Natasha will be the only person caught by a zombie now. However, while he has her cornered, the protagonist receives an alert from his system about the death of a player. His system also says that Taylor's secret squadron detected the presence of survivors. Several of them are in Zone B16. Natasha and the others see another squad approaching and realize they need to run immediately, but they have no chance as they are spotted soon after. One of the Iron Soldiers applies confidential protocols, eliminating the target at once. Kang sees this happen and wonders whether he can stop this thing or should defuse the shield first. But amidst these thoughts, he is also attacked. Soon he realizes he won't have much time to think. Suddenly, there's a change of scene. Natasha notices it and is startled. However, it turns out to be the NPC merchant who claims it's a waste for 2 players to die without using all their conquest points. She blames the protagonist and he apologizes, asking what he can do to make amends. The merchant offers him a pack of cards, but Kang refuses. Buy. He knows when the shop opens, there's no peace treaty to be observed. So he tells the merchant to offer the card pack to Natasha. Kane also knows that the attacks happening in front of the shop will upset this girl, and these players knew what that meant. The merchant says Natasha won't make it out alive anyway. She offers the card pack, claiming Natasha might get lucky and draw a mythic card that could help her survive. The protagonist asks, "Is selling card packs the only thing you know how to do?" Then he is shocked to hear that Natasha Ivanova will be using all her 374 conquest points to buy random card packs. After that, he simply observes. Natasha opens the packs and only draws common cards. Soon, she grows extremely frustrated for not getting something good. The merchant tries to cheer her up, saying there's still a chance. She grows increasingly nervous. In turn, Cam comments, "I find it quite amusing to watch the circus burn." After opening countless card packs, Natasha Ivanova is left with just one in hand, hoping this pack will have something good. Otherwise, it would mean her death. She thinks that a mythological card bird is dreaming too much. Yet, if she can at least get a legendary or even a heroic one, it would suffice. But she isn't lucky. Therefore, the saleswoman tries to console her, offering a potion. The protagonist interjects, saying this is the right time for her to close the shop. The saleswoman replies, considering the unexpected deaths before, besides the fact that both have made sacrifices and face problems, it's time for a legendary to appear. Consequently, she claims the next package purchase will contain a legendary card. The protagonist's system warns, stating that the Hell Monarch is in shock. It says it can't offer help. Hence, Natasha Ivanova swears at him in Russian, using all kinds of insults. Kang says these curses are inefficient, and he ends up agreeing to buy a pack of cards. With that, he ends up drawing a repeated card. However, his system asks, would you like to upgrade it with a combination of skills? He thinks this is better than getting a useless regular skill and wonders what it will be. At this point, Natasha is extremely furious with him, but the protagonist ignores her because the saleswoman says she's already about to leave. However, Kane tells her to wait. Even so, the saleswoman leaves once again. Natasha Ivanova resumes the cursing without further hindrances. The Iron Soldiers prepare to attack. They're going to reapply the confidential protocols and eliminate all witnesses. But before they do that, the protagonist manages to eliminate Natasha Ivanova for good. After that, he advances toward the soldiers. Kang isn't about to die here like his last enemy, he thinks. He fights with all his strength and consequently eliminates several of the soldiers. While he attacks with his mentally controlled swords, the soldiers counterattack with heavy military weaponry, firing laser beams in the protagonist's direction. Kang is surprised. All this is coming from a pharmaceutical company. He wonders, maybe I should buy some pharma stocks when I get home. But for that, he needs to defeat these soldiers first. However, he claims the company controlling these soldiers won't be on my shopping list. Through the destruction he caused, eliminating such a large number of soldiers, their loss will be huge. Maybe this company will go bankrupt. After destroying everyone, the protagonist completes the zombie apocalypse tower. As a reward for being a victorious survivor, he receives a random equipment ticket. He can pick one of the failed player's skill cards. He doesn't even need to check all of them to know which one he wants and promptly selects the Oculus skill, once belonging to Natasha Ivanova. When the tower is completed and players return to the previous world, those who failed also return. The protagonist notes that two of the group, including Natasha, died fighting Blackie. Due to the pain, they probably weren't able to get out of there. However, this only happens when the tower doesn't cause definite death. Before leaving, Kang wishes Natasha Ivanova a good job. She wonders why he's saying that. Kang asks, do you want to get arrested? If you do, you should just turn yourself in to the nearest police station. Natasha asks, are you just going to let me escape? He answers, yes, but tell everyone that the Hero King is amazing and they shouldn't get in his way. Also, the dead don't tell tales, so I need you alive for that. Later, Park asks why the protagonist left the enemies alive. He answers that it was for the compensation of the legendary skill they left behind. This leaves Park quite irritated. He asks, why would you let those who betrayed you return with their heads still on their shoulders? Kang states he's not a bloodthirsty killer. His wish is to be more peaceful and philanthropic. Park sarcastically says, you're great with these speeches. He then asks, what was the enemy's aim, after all? The protagonist doesn't answer. He simply says, I'm the one managing Park's internet cafe now. His friend gives up on getting an answer. He just wishes the protagonist a safe return and tells him not to overexert himself. Kang thanks him for the concern, claiming he's going to take care of himself. In the world within the towers, the players are called in various ways. The same goes for this player. In his case, he's called a hero, but he thinks that, in the end, players are not heroes. They are merely war heroes. Just like Natasha Ivanova, there are those who eliminated their own country's enemies without the least hesitation. However, Kang doesn't want to become that kind of hero. He believes there are no real heroes in the world he lives in. He ends up being recognized and soon realizes he's been careless because it's morning. After leaving, the people who saw him comment on his reputation. They're unsure whether what is said about the protagonist in the media is true or not. Either way, what's important to them is that Kang is the strongest active player in the country, and the rest is irrelevant. Kane breathes a sigh of relief upon hearing this. He then heads towards his home, but in the end, he gets caught before he even arrives. Some journalists try to surround him, but he escapes before that happens. Since he's going to do it anyway, he prefers to rest inside the tower. Upon arriving, some men inform him that the invocation ceremony of the Holy Warrior was a success. Kang still doesn't know what it's about until the saint herself says, it's a pleasure to meet you, affirming that he's a warrior from another world who decided to answer her prayer. She introduces herself as Alicia Celestina, the 37th saint of the sacred kingdom of Celestina. The protagonist then decides to play along and says, I am the warrior who will save the world with speed and precision. He asks, what can I do for the saint? She responds, for this, you need to tell me about what has been happening on the continent of Philia since the beginning. Kang assumes that in the beginning, there must have been some kind of fight between the celestial beings and the demons. The saint confirms, saying, that's exactly it. With that, a war between light and darkness occurred. Soon the moon, the demons, who were supposed to be confined to the world of darkness and the abyss, began invading the world of light. About 30 minutes later, after much explanation, the protagonist asks, can we go out to save the world? Now the saint responds, the story is only beginning. The Celestials were afraid humans would abuse the powers of the Ark, so the chosen warrior must pass through an approval process. The protagonist wheels about and walks off. The saint asks, where are you going? Kang replies, I'm going to work. The saint says, you don't even know where the Ark is located. Kang asks, do you know? She answers, no. Kang shrugs. In any case, it makes no difference. Suddenly, a kind of portal appears out of nowhere, and demonic creatures begin to emerge. The saint sees this up close and wonders aloud, how did a demon enter the sacred land? The knights advance, shouting, this place is not for demonic beings. They draw their weapons and prepare for battle. From afar, the protagonist watches everything unfold. The others wonder, why aren't divine magic and aura blade working on the enemy? As the demon charges forward, Kang tells everyone to back off and creates a shield to protect them. The saint says, I'll help you. But Kang responds, it's fine. She told everyone to stay behind the shield, worried for the protagonist, especially after seeing him rush straight into danger for everyone's sake. Alicia decided to call upon her goddess, asking for protection for them all. She was not alone. The other two prayed as well. Moments later, the protagonist's shield shattered, and the saint asked, are you all right? Kang replied, the enemy has retreated, but before leaving, they sent a telepathic message. They claimed that it is the demon's duty to reach the sacred Ark. Before long, the world, filled with the light they despise, will be covered by their darkness. They warned me not to interfere. Hearing this, the saint trembled with fear. Still, Kang insisted we can't waste any more time. Even though you're still shaken by what just happened, do you have any idea where the Ark might be? Alicia answered, I have a theory about its location. With that, the protagonist set out in search of the relic. All the way, he praised his cat for playing the part of a demon so convincingly, since the entire scene had been staged by the creature itself. Kang thought that he used the cat to intimidate them, so he will have to refrain from using dark skills for a while. He also tells Aki, don't use your spikes for now. The saint sees that the protagonist has lagged behind and asks, should I go slower? The protagonist replies, no. Meanwhile, he concludes that it's better to do things his way, because this is the correct way to use a legendary skill. After riding for a while, they arrive at the Adventurers Guild. Kang mentions having heard that something is needed to enter the Labyrinth. The receptionist says, you must be referring to the Adventurer's license. Then she asked him to wait a bit. While waiting in the guild's lobby, the saint says, this place is called Garcia, the Labyrinth City. It's a neutral city located between the territories of the Sacred Kingdom of Ernestina and the Draga Empire. As the name suggests, the city was built around an ancient underground. Kang says, it would be hard to find a better place to hide the Ark, the ancestral weapon of the celestial beings. Next, it's their turn to be served, and the receptionist tells him to sign the paperwork. The saint almost signs it until Kang tells her to wait. He reads, in the event of death within the maze, the guild won't be held responsible. Even if the body and belongings are recovered, they will belong to the city. Shortly after, he asks, do I have to agree to this to get the license? The receptionist explains that they are offering a fair chance to everyone to grab the massive fortune of the Labyrinth. Moreover, adventures are risky, and it's up to the adventurer to choose whether to embark on this journey or not. Sarcastically, the protagonist comments the guild does a meticulous job in understanding how precious life is. Upon signing, the receptionist wishes them good luck on their journey. Sometime later, they finally enter the maze. Both are only on level 1, and the protagonist asks, are you ready, Saint? She replies affirmatively. They immediately face their first enemy, a kind of giant rat and its offspring. Kang creates an opening for the Saint to attack. Then, with a precise hit, she strikes the rat. They advance quite fast and quickly arrive on level 5. The protagonist states, this is due to your abilities. He doesn't skimp on compliments when referring to her. But the Saint says, from time to time, there were adventurers who obliterated the magical beasts that approached them, thus clearing the path. She also says, we're in a hurry, and that's why I'm grateful for the work done by those who cleared the way. With this, she suggests, if adventurers always cooperate, demons won't seem as terrifying. The protagonist tells her not to worry as he vows to bring back the ancient weapons safe and sound. Then, some labyrinth bandits approach them, saying they can't proceed without paying the toll. The Saint gets worried, unlike Kang, who states, I don't know what this is called in this world, but it's a decent sideline in every good-sized labyrinth. Usually, it's referred to as labyrinth crime or adventurer hunting. The bandit claims that because he knows so much about them, the protagonist should hand over everything he has. This frightens the saint, and she tries to negotiate with the criminals. Kang joins the game and asks the bandits, "Can you listen to a story?" He discloses that in the beginning, there were celestial beings and demons. These demons were almost destroying the world, and he claims to be the warrior who came to stop them. But for that, he needs to find an ancient weapon that's inside the labyrinth. And I'm not alone in my quest, he continues. I have the saint from the Holy Realm by my side. With that, he kindly asks, "May we pass?" The saint underscores the request, stating, "It is for the sake of world peace." Next, the bandits start laughing at them. Mocking that they won't fall for this nonsense, Celestina becomes apprehensive when they fail to convince the bandits. The protagonist knew this would be the outcome, so he decides to take action. He expresses, whether one is a warrior or a saint once in a labyrinth, they must act like adventurers. With that, he attacks mercilessly. The bandits try to defend themselves, but they are no match for the protagonist. Suddenly, someone else appears, asking, "How dare you assault my men?" "You're more skilled than you seem," the person claims. The saint quickly recognizes this woman as the guild's receptionist who attended them earlier, but doesn't understand why. Kane reveals that the guild and the bandits are in cahoots. They throw new adventurers into life or death situations and force them to calculate the value of their lives. After all, even if they can't pay, a human body still holds some worth. Celestina is horrified by this. The receptionist calls her knave and asks, "Why did you decide to become an adventurer when this is how things work in this city?" However, she alleges that it's too late for them to understand and charges at them. But the protagonist defends himself and warns the adversary to be careful where she steps. The wound attacked from above, but didn't notice several thorns growing from the ground. The protagonist used his cat for this purpose. While he distracted the enemy, Blackie did its job. He then tells the saint that the way is clear, and they should leave as soon as possible. After advancing a little further into the labyrinth, Kang finds a good place to camp and announces that they'll stay there for the night and continue the next day. He notices the saint is shaken and realizes she's been like this since they encountered the bandits. Soon, he understands that she's not used to seeing the world without her saint title. Celestina says that the world is about to end and yet humans fight among themselves over trivial matters. She then asks if the protagonist is accustomed to seeing things like this. Kang recalls the leaders of his world and says that regardless of where, the world remains the same. The saint is intrigued by this response and asks more about his hometown. The protagonist says that his hometown went through several crises, and with no one knowing how to handle things, it was total chaos when it all began. At first, he says he couldn't just. But after a while, when he regained his composure, it seemed everyone was only looking out for themselves. The saint asked, "Did Kang act the same way?" Kang replied, "What do you think?" She stayed silent for quite a while, until the quiet became uncomfortable. When she finally spoke, her answer caught the protagonist off guard, leaving him momentarily stunned. Then he started laughing, and both of them fell into silence again. Kang wondered why it had gone so quiet, certain it was almost time, until the saleswoman returned and handed him a pack of cards. However, he wanted to check the product list first, as he was still 2 levels short of his goal. A few days later, they reached level 100 and encountered a group of demons who were also searching for the ancient ark. As the protagonist moved forward, the saint stayed at the rear, providing support, allowing Kang to strike and defeat a giant serpent with ease. Not only that, but the leader of the serpents was also taken down. When the demons lost the battle, the protagonist simply said, "It was a good journey." He had not only leveled up, but also earned 10,000 conquest points and received a random skill package. Kang, however, muttered that the demons had chosen the worst possible timing to show up, showing up only after he passed the test. On the other hand, the saint is thrilled about their achievement until they both get surprised by something. Right in front of them, an item emerges that apparently is what they were looking for. The protagonist approaches the ark and says it looks rather simple for an ancient weapon. His system alerts that he acquired the quest's item, and right after, the maze begins to react to it. A portal opens, and the saint says, "We should cross it to the exit." After they arrive outside, she feels relieved. However, someone shows up and initially applauds the saint's work and the otherworldly warriors, saying that thanks to them, the Empire's mission of finding the ark has been made much easier. His name is Milis Draga. He claims that the ark's power now belongs to him, the Empire's representative, and demands they hand over the item. The saint acknowledges him as the Empire's crown prince. Kang says, "This prince is not on our side." Milis asserts that if they hand over the ark, their lives will be spared, but the saint tries to argue, stating, "You can't do that. The Ark's power should be used to protect the world from demons. Soon, the prince reveals that he has an Ark fragment and claims that once he collects them all, the demons will bow before him. In turn, the protagonist merely says the prince made his job easier and brought the item he was seeking. Nils becomes angry and orders his men to attack, claiming it's time for the Empire's proud swordsmen to prove their worth and loyalty. With this speech, the entire prince's army is motivated and launches the attack. The protagonist's system alerts that the scenario is nearing its end and the prince, along with his royal guards, is after the Ark's power. Cain does not stand still. With a buff from the saint, he receives celestial armor, increasing his defenses. Not only that, but his attacks have also been amplified. Through this power surge, Cain manages to fight an entire army on equal footing. One of the prince's men suggests we should retreat. It's no longer safe here. But in his arrogance, the prince replies, it's not yet time to flee. Cain receives a warning from his system, notifying him that the prince is absorbing the Ark's power. He had already predicted this and warns the saint of the danger. While the protagonist takes cover on the other side, the prince is transforming into a horrific giant beast. Some of his men try to ask, is his highness all right? But he merely tells everyone to get out of his way. He turned into a demonic beast, even attacking his own soldiers. After this, the protagonist uses his abilities combined with those of the saint and summons a magical armor. Along with this, he throws a potion of earthquake and fire. With this, the entire scene is besieged, creating the perfect distraction for him to approach the enemy. Kang seizes the gap to hit the giant monster in several different directions. Novus gets furious at this and says that a protagonist cannot hide in the fire forever. He then tries to attack the protagonist but realizes it wasn't him, just an illusion of fire. The protagonist appears on the other side, sarcastically saying, with all this power going to your head, Novus, you must be seeing things. Soon, he attacks the monster with a surefire blow. Novus was caught off guard and hit from top to bottom. On the other hand, the protagonist emerged victorious. Amid this, his system alerts him that he obtained the second fragment of the Ark. In this way, the full power of the item is now in his hands. This power is revealed, surprising even the saint, who could only imagine what it was like. Kang thinks that everything ended perfectly because he only wants to know about the levels and points he earned with his victory. Then, he hands over the Ark to the saint. The girl does not understand why the warrior from another world is trusting this power to her. She claims that she is not qualified for this. But Kang says, there is no other person capable of this duty but you. Otherwise, this power would end up in Emperor Draga's hands. Kang tries to convince her to protect this power. If you don't, it will end up in the wrong hands. The saint replies, I cannot be irresponsible with the incomparable dangerous power of the Ark. Kang responds, from my experience, the madmen who seek power and destruction usually do so because they carry a great burden. But I believe you will fight alongside the others for good. She thanks him and says, your words made me feel much better. The protagonist is pleased to hear this. After this, he earns various special rewards for completing the mission and returns home. A week later, Kang thinks that all he did was complete a single tower. He went in thinking he'd have a good rest, but ended up trying too hard. Then Kang sees some articles about him on the internet and realizes that not everyone thinks the same about him. He knows that it's still mid-January and that there are other more important things right now. A few days later, he takes to the streets again. As always, reporters follow him everywhere, eager for answers. However, the protagonist just enters the next tower, leaving them to talk amongst themselves. They watch, wondering if he went into the Awakening Tower. Inside, an entity greets him, saying it has been waiting for him for a long time. Kang replies, stop beating around the bush, get straight to the test. Soon, an unknown challenge unfolds before him. The entity comments, you're very impatient. Even without your complaints, it would have started anyway. The test begins and Kang finds himself in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by several mirrors. He breaks them and tries to move forward. But right in front of him, a copy of himself wearing a clown mask appears. You don't even seem surprised to see me, it says. Kang doesn't want to chat. He prepares to attack. But his opponent is a shadow of him, mimicking all his moves. As soon as Kang attacks, the opponent does the same, and their powers clash. Kang decides to change his strategy, and he uses his shadow creature. Meanwhile, he keeps distracting the enemy. The clown mimics his moves, and Kang realizes that he is a perfect copy of him. Even so, he doesn't stop attacking. He thinks he has fought the same enemy in each season, but it still leaves a bitter taste in his mouth. Then he finally uses his dark magic attacks. He doesn't want to give the enemy any advantage. Kang is attacked, but he uses his magic shield to protect himself through his blessing called the One who deceived death. He naturally evades the lethal attack. Not only that, but he takes the chance to retaliate. The protagonist thinks the way to conclude this is quite simple. Even so, he doesn't change his way of acting and charges at the enemy, intending to pierce him. but as his moves are perfectly mimicked, he is also hit head-on, because that was the clown's plan. The clown asks, why is Kang so serious? He could be a hero, but he can also be a villain. It's up to them to decide what they'll be at this stage, so Kang shouldn't take himself so seriously. According to the clown, there isn't a single thing in this world that should be taken seriously. Kang merely says the clown talks too much, and that he has a way of silencing him forever. Then, with his hands on the enemy's face, he explodes his head, thus definitively defeating the clown. Not only that, but he takes the clown's mask for himself. Then he asks, is there anything else I should do? The clown monarch appears and calls him child of 1,000 faces and talents, telling Kang to choose what he wants to become now. Sometime later, in a hospital, Master Park runs desperately to a room. Upon arriving there, he finds the protagonist bedridden. He is desperate, as he heard that his friend was hospitalized and came running as fast as he could. However, on arriving, he finds Kang acting as if nothing had happened. The protagonist asks, how can you come to the hospital empty-handed? His friend realizes that Kang still has his sense of humor. This means that Kang must be okay. Then Park tells him, stop messing around and start fighting for world peace again. After all, you're a hero. Kang asks, is the manager going to make me work with a hole in my chest? Park, however, states, you surely drank a healing potion or something similar. But Kang says, despite appearances, this is not a common wound. Park is not surprised knowing his friend's Monarch and says he is not easy to handle. The protagonist replies, it's not that serious. He explains that the awakening at level 50 occurs in different ways depending on the Monarch. And in his case, in exchange for ending himself, his reward was to receive his own talent. In other words, he took all the skill and attribute cards he had earned so far. Not only that, but he also improved his skills. With that, he got everything he wanted. Now he asks Park, what's the next mission? Park answers, you have to find a villain and defeat him. A real villain, the protagonist asks. Yes, a rare type these days known as the Black Player. This so-called Black Player is terrorizing the city and like a maestro, orchestrates great chaos. In doing so, he calls people a bunch of ignorant fools, claiming that he, the great maestro, will show the way with his remarkable talents. By setting the city on fire, he pleases the Fire Monarch, saying, as always, the Fire Monarch is the only one who understands my art. After that, the maestro sees the police approaching and calls them fools for trying to capture him. The police see the Maniac enter the tower, leading them behind. Sometime later, the protagonist appears and sees with his own eyes the mess that was made in the city. He thinks this guy is not your typical psychopath. Soon, he decides to enter the tower and go after him. Upon arriving there, Kang encounters an arena and his opponent is indeed the Maniac Maestro. However, the opponent did not expect to face Kang as he knows his reputation. The protagonist says, even if reluctantly, you'll have to face me. With this, the Maniac asks, are you someone who can understand my art? Kang calls him a crazy magician, wanting to understand why the world is full of lunatics like him. His opponent becomes furious upon hearing this. He does not like to see his art being downgraded to something mass-produced. Then he begins his fiery attacks and tries to set the protagonist on fire entirely. However, Kang says the specialty of a charlatan is to get irritated over nothing, out of nowhere. This makes his opponent even more furious until Kang notices an attack coming from above. The psychotic Maniac thinks that with this he has defeated Kang, but the protagonist is smarter than that and manages to escape. Saying afterwards that his opponent will have to try much harder to catch him, the enemy launches a new attack. This time, he manages to hit the protagonist and laughs in Kang's face, claiming that thanks to him, he could create an amazing melody. However, just as he was celebrating victory, the protagonist appears, saying that was just one of my illusions. He advances toward the enemy, attacking him. The enemy dodges, leaving the protagonist quite impressed. Even though he dodged, he is hurt and becomes extremely irritated with the protagonist. There's no way for a product of illusory art to speak. He explains. Kang replies, I'm not good enough to comment on that. Then he uses his ability to create several clones of himself, saying, this is the audience that Maniac deserves. For maybe, this is your last performance. The opponent retorts, your art will not die. He then causes a tremendous explosion within himself. Kang didn't see this coming. His system claims that he won the battle. He knows a player cannot kill another within the tower and thinks he should have waited for the Maniac to freak out at the exit. The protagonist leaves the tower and teleports to France. As he imagined, the magician's specialty was sudden death, and he found him in his home country. Soon, he asserted that his enemy could not escape. Kang attacked him with his ice blades, preventing the enemy from running away. With this, he advanced in his direction and struck, aiming to defeat him definitively. However, a shield appeared around the magician. The protagonist realized that it wasn't his opponent, but rather someone who had intervened on his behalf. From the other side, a woman emerged and told Kang to drop his weapons. The protagonist saw an old acquaintance, Street Mary Jagger, master of the Knights and Rescue Guild, and asked, "What are you doing here?" She answered, "The French government asked for my guild's cooperation in an investigation about the Black Player. We were waiting for him to leave the tower to capture him." Kang asked, "Can you free him from the shield?" Mary replied, "The Black Player cannot die yet." She paused, then added, "Killing in the middle of pursuit is only acceptable in certain circumstances." The protagonist sarcastically commented, "You really are a saint." Mary said, "Revenge breeds more revenge. Just because the enemy acts like a monster doesn't mean you should act like one too." Kang asks, "What's wrong with killing the Black Player, especially after what he's done?" She answers, "I'm saying this for your own good." Either way, she asks, "Are you aware of the types of global consequences this would bring?" But while the two argued, the ice covering the enemy melted. He took this opportunity to cause another explosion. However, he couldn't break through the barrier and ended up flagellating himself with fire. The saint says again, "I'm trying to protect you." And now that the criminal has been captured, she adds, "I'll take over from here. You should return home and rest." Since it's like that, Kane does as she says, claiming, "Thanks to you, I went to France for nothing." But before he leaves, the protagonist tries one last move. With his dark magic, he attempts to strike the enemy again. However, the saint still maintains her shield in front of the fallen player and says, "You're just wasting your time." Out loud, he agrees with Mary, but in his thoughts, he already expected this to happen. He attacks the enemy again, this time in a more effective way. The saint is surprised to see what Kang has done. What remained of the hostage she was protecting was just a pool of blood. This caused her and her organization to feel provoked and the clown Monarch like that. Kang asks, "Do you know how many people have died at the hands of this lunatic?" Not only adults, but children have also suffered at his hands. For this reason, the protagonist affirms that this psychopath didn't deserve any forgiveness. Black players are destroying the world faster than the towers, he says. Yet, the saint still disagrees with these methods. King already knows what she's going to say, that he who kills a monster also becomes one, but he doesn't care about that at all. However, Mary approaches him, looking directly into his eyes. She says, "Kang is not a monster." In a way, the protagonist is surprised, but doesn't show any reaction around her. Later, he answers a call from Master Park. His friend loudly says, "Kang didn't warn me he was facing a serial killer." The protagonist replies, "In that case, I'll go deaf at any time," and states that he only did his job. Then he asks, "What's the problem?" Park says, "You shouldn't have executed him in public. It's considered excessive use of force, and now the French government is going to be on your case." He also says, "I've scheduled a flight for you to return home as soon as possible." But the protagonist says he still has something to do. His friend doesn't like that at all, but Kang says he has a personal life besides work and adds that when he gets home, he'll explain the details. After that, he ends the call, leaving his friend talking alone on the other side. Kang is grateful for the help, but sometimes finds his friend quite exaggerated. Now he is left alone with his company and thanks the saint. He says he is indebted to her, and the least he can do is fulfill her request. Maria says she feels relieved to know this. The protagonist tries to approach, but she only says, "I'll see you tomorrow in Paris." Soon, Kang says, "You're great at setting boundaries." He asks if the saint has anything more to say. She replies, "No, I just wish you a good night." After leaving the room, the protagonist, the saint, wonders if it's okay to ask such a favor from Kang. Either way, the next day, a tower is opened in the French capital, and the protagonist is already there. His goal is to get to the end of the scenario. He is being pursued by some enemies and retaliates against their attacks from afar. The saint is with him inside the carriage. Kane then says, "There's a bridge up ahead. We can block it to stop our enemies." The two of them are in a tower that recreates the French Revolution. Their goal is to protect the nobles from the revolutionaries. Kang, along with the saint, blocks the bridge and destroys it, preventing anyone from passing. After this, they stand guard waiting for enemies to approach while the nobles flee. But instead of fighting, the enemy leader calls for a ceasefire and asks the players why they are doing this. After all, he claims, "Until now, you were on the side of the revolutionary army fighting for a new world. Suddenly, you've switched sides." He also says it was thanks to the saint that the revolutionaries have come so far. Why is she no longer fighting for the cause? The revolutionary leader accuses her of allying with the corrupt authority of the royalty. Still, he doesn't want to face a former ally. Kang asks, "Is that why the saint needed my help?" He now realizes this is not the first time Rhodia has been in this world. Rhodia says, "I was here for the first time because of a tier 5 tower. I did not hesitate for a second while fighting for your cause, freedom, equality, and union." The protagonist notes some familiarity in this. Rhodia adds it's the same slogan used by the Great Revolution of the past. Kang says that those who believe they are fighting for a righteous cause are now her enemies. She then asks Maria if she wants to switch sides. Now is the time. She continues, the tower is a restricted entity. Looking towards the future, we need to face them in order to reach tier 6 and complete it. The protagonist agrees to continue. Soon, the saint says, I am happy to have you by my side in the tower. After this, the revolutionary leader tries to argue with the visitors, but he is soon hit by the protagonist. Kang laughs at the situation. She asks the leader, do you still think the visitors are apostles doing God's will? She gives a final warning to the enemies. Even though the bridge has fallen, you should retreat. I don't want to spill any blood. The leader replies, I cannot do that, even if it means facing visitors from another world. If it is for the greater good, I will do so. He continues, I will proceed with the anti-visitor tactics. The leader directs his soldiers to activate the tactical mode of the armor and release the magic armor. With that, the leader tells them, fight for freedom and equality. In this way, enemies attack using enhanced firearms, which with each shot causes an energy explosion. As Maria is a saint, she uses her abilities to buff the protagonist. Through this, he receives a boost of 1000%, and now his movements and reflexes are much faster. Kang is impressed with his own strength and thinks that at this level, the fight will be a bit easier. Until then, Maria tells the protagonist to retreat as she will take the lead. However, the protagonist does not let this happen. He causes a blackout with his dark magic, preventing her from advancing again. Kang takes the lead and slices through some enemies. With this, he thinks that obviously the army from a tier 6 tower would be strong. He didn't expect to have to calculate his moves precisely in the darkness. Still, he asks the saint to raise her shield. Maria, for her part, asks Kang to remove the curtain of absolute darkness. He says he doesn't want the saint to interfere and makes the excuse that he just wants to get a good idea of her buffs. After all, the XP of the attributes will be shared between them. Not only that, but thanks to the saint, he got what he needed to finish off all the enemies and didn't even need her to interfere in the combat. The saint is a bit frustrated, but either way, she knows that she has to proceed. The protagonist, mounted on his giant cat, asks her to climb aboard too. They need to reach the king as soon as possible. He asserts that none of this will matter if their city falls. Maria says, you don't need to do all this. Kang, however, asserts that he feels very comfortable and adds, if you just throw the buffs, I can defeat all the enemies and spare you from this. The saint replies, that's not why I called you. The protagonist brushes it off, saying, it doesn't matter. After all, already doing all this for you. Elsewhere, a place is being set on fire. Some are screaming to kill the enemies of the revolution. The one in charge says, these are the orders from the Duke of Blood and Iron. All sympathizers of the old system must die, and no one should be spared, regardless of gender or age. Upon arriving there, the saint is horrified to see the damage done. She wonders aloud, why didn't the revolutionary army go so far? Kang says, this is exactly what an ideology means. He claims the same would have happened to the townspeople they left behind. Then his system alerts him. The Duke's personal bodyguards, the Iron Blood soldiers, are blocking the way. Soon, Kang states they are no longer the revolutionary army fighting for a great cause, but a recognized group of criminals. He tells the saint that there will be a blackout for the next few minutes. Time passes, and they complete the tower. Then, the saint meets some reporters who want to know more about her raid with the Hero King. She is slightly bothered, but says that for the sake of their countries, they are just professional acquaintances. However, to provoke her, the protagonist says, we had a busy night in several ways, and asks, what else could a man and woman do in a tower besides dating? Maria is super embarrassed and claims, it's not that, but Kang keeps teasing, adding more to the story. She then gets mad and tells the protagonist to shut up right in front of several cameras. Kang only did this to increase his provocation attribute and please his clown monarch. Therefore, he receives an alert from the system informing him about a reward, a package of rare cards. However, the protagonist is frustrated because he expected something more until he becomes happy knowing he was also rewarded with a 6th sense skill. A while later, the news is already spread, and the protagonist says it's too late to say we're just friends. Even embarrassed, Rhodia shows a facial expression that indicates she's happy with the idea. Sometime later, they have already entered a new tower, the one with the frozen Elmo enemies. The protagonist needs a buff and says to the saint, I am deeply sorry for what I did before. Please, I need your help. However, in Maria's words, she shows her dissatisfaction with what happened, even though her facial expression indicates otherwise. Soon, she advances and tells Kang to stay out of the way, claiming after a hot night comes a cold one. Then, she fights alone and using her powers completes the Tower of the Frozen Helmets. After that, the two conducted a series of shocking raids for a month. With each victory, they both leveled up and earned rewards. When they finished, Maria accompanied Kang to the airport. He was still teasing her with his jokes about them being a couple. However, Maria said, I envy you. How can you act so irresponsibly? Kang took it as a compliment. Maria added, even so, I'm happy to have you as a player I can trust. The protagonist replied, I feel the same. Maria then wished him a safe journey home. Before leaving, Kang said the same and gave thanks. For the good he has done to the world on the plane, Kang reflects on this. He thinks it is more efficient to cooperate in this way, but national interest is everyone's priority. He also says that at some point, he will have to invite the saint to his country. His cat interrupts him and asks, how long are you going to keep petting me? The protagonist asks, since when do you know how to speak? Blackie answers, he has evolved. Then Kang asks, why didn't you say anything before? The cat replies, I didn't want to disrupt your flirtation with that woman, but now I want to stop the games. Open the package of cards you won. Kang does this, hoping to pull out a legendary one. He says if you call decks simply a set of cards, once you unlock all of them, you can build a real deck. The most important things in this game's decks are synergy and classes. Despite already having won synergies by getting the right ones before, because of the quantity of extra products that don't match, I couldn't get the class buff, but I received the Shadow Assassin class along with some enhancements. Now he says, I'm going to take a little rest. When I get home, I'll test my new deck on some towers. Upon arriving in Korea, the protagonist goes in search of a tower. On the streets, people recognize him as usual and see him going into a nightclub. However, Kang is not there to party, but to talk to a drunk vagabond. The individual claims he has a hangover and asks, who dares to disturb me? Kang merely says, I will count to 3. By the end of the countdown, you ought to stand up and follow me. However, the drunkard asks, who are you to give orders? He also says, my father is the president of Grupox. You can't treat me this way. But the protagonist, Aang, does not care about that. He grabs the individual by the hair and drags him out of the place. Before that, he went to the association president, claiming he was planning to test his new deck and thought about taking the newbies on a free excursion. The president said that if that was the case, there was a promising rookie who had recently awoken. But upon meeting this promising rookie, Kang couldn't believe he was the same one who had finished a Tier 3 tower. Upon hearing this, the rookie realized he was standing before the Hero King and asked, are you here to take me to a Tier 4 tower? I'm tired of Tier 3 towers. This left the protagonist impressed. He decided to face a Tier 4 tower with a rookie and wanted to first witness what he could do. Then he put the rookie against an enemy. The boy was scared as he saw up close what he would have to face. Instead of fighting, he started to run and asked the protagonist for help. Kang merely said, I won't move. The spoiled boy asked, do you think everything's going to be okay if you let me die here? From afar, Kang noticed the boy was only able to withstand the blows because of the armor he was wearing. He knew it wasn't bad to get a free excursion. But the selfish only think about fighting on their own and just want to increase their levels and attributes easily. So he wonders who will save the world in the future. Upon hearing the boy baiting for help, the protagonist intervenes and says, if you want to be there for free, you have to earn it. After this, new enemies emerge from above. The boy is terrified by this, unlike the protagonist who quickly solves the problem. Now that they are safe, the spoiled boy starts to threaten the protagonist, claiming, when we get out of here, I'll talk to my father, what happened. But Kang claims, I am a wicked teacher trying to teach you a lesson and transform you. Do you think there will be a happily ever after? The boy thinks for a moment, but doesn't come up with an answer. Kang continues, there is no right answer to that, and with his skills, places a death mark on the boy, making him a target. The boy quickly starts to feel the effects as this debuff bypasses his attributes. For that reason, he is hit. The protagonist says, this excursion is not for people like you. He adds, if you think this is unfair, you may return when you're stronger. Back in the real world, already outside the tower, the spoiled boy asks, what is happening? Kang replies, I killed him in an almost painless way. He doesn't even realize he's dead. Right away, the boy gets furious again, claiming, you won't get away with this. The protagonist calmly asks, what will happen to me? The boy sneers, apparently you don't understand the power of conglomerates. But Kang retorts, I don't care if a killer is sent after me. It doesn't matter if a conglomerate sees me as an enemy. There's an entire country that disapproves of your actions and doesn't want you alive for much longer. He continues, one more large or small company won't make a difference. Kang adds, if you want, you can try your luck. Suddenly, the two end up entering a new tower called the Endless Labyrinth. Kang is caught off guard. But then he realizes it's worse than he imagined. Alongside him, the spoiled boy appears, along with other people who seem completely lost. One of them recognizes the protagonist as the Hero King and feels relieved, already imagining he'll be safe near him. Awoden looks at her group on the ground and realizes they need to collaborate to finish the tower. The protagonist sees that now they are a group. Even if he doesn't want to, he has to survive with everyone. The woman sees the rules and says they can respawn if killed by another player. So if they are in danger, they can kill themselves to get out of there. Kane doesn't like this at all. He thinks they won't last long. Even so, he says, this is a free expedition from the Hero King. Everyone must present themselves along with their skills. With that, they start the mission. After battling some enemies, the protagonist thinks they are progressing well. He attributes this to his newly acquired sixth sense. However, he knows his group is made up of spoiled boys and players who have just started. So he concludes that if this crazy team division was meant to balance their power, the opponents are probably all veteran players level 40. Therefore, it would be no surprise if they seem like easy prey. Then he tells everyone to gather in one place because they have guests. Next, the enemies appear. The clash between them starts immediately. The protagonist states if most of the team dies, the rest will be disqualified. The opposing team is already at a disadvantage. Therefore, the scenario itself finds a way to beat them, thus disqualifying everyone as per the rules. Kang, for his part, notices something and kills the enemies before his own tower. He knows that if a player is killed by the maze, they cannot be reborn, even after it's completed. With that, he says they'd better be grateful for my kindness in having killed them before the tower. From afar, another player observes the protagonist and tries to hurry to warn his friends, but he is surprised when Kang appears out of nowhere. The player is mega shocked and in disguise claims to be a big fan of the Hero King. Kang just asks, "Are you here alone?" Shortly after, the player runs away to rejoin his group. He tells them, "I found other players. One of them was high level, and the others were weak." Their leader responds, "We only need to deal with the weaker ones. The rest will be disqualified." However, he asks, "Are we running in the right direction?" The player apologizes, saying, "It's better this way." Then the others realize they've fallen into a trap. Before they can do anything, they are defeated by the protagonist and the entire group fails to complete the raid. Kang doesn't stop there. He goes to all opposing groups and defeats them. Thus, completing the first maze, the others in his group, who were practically carried, celebrate the victory and also win prizes. But the system alerts that they must decide who will get the reward. In case of a dispute, no one gets anything. Soon, they realize that the reward is a group one, not individual. Kang then steps forward, claiming he did all the heavy lifting, so he deserves the reward. He asks if anyone opposes this. The only one who objects is the spoiled boy, saying that he will keep the reward as compensation for what happened before. But this triggers a discussion as another group member claims he is more deserving, since he was the only one who helped the hero. Because of this, a fight starts between the two. The spoiled one and the stingy one are ready to duel for the prize, something the protagonist doesn't like at all. From outside the fight, the other two try to appease the situation, but impatiently, the protagonist kills the two fighters, claiming they should have some awareness. After all, they got XP and achievement points for free, so they should be grateful. He asks, is anyone else going to object to this? The two remaining are terrified and do not oppose him. With that, everything is settled. Kang keeps the set of rewards. After this, the protagonist unlocks a ticket and a random blessing. Upon using them, the guaranteed blessings are quite cool, and Blackie even praises the protagonist's luck. The system asks, do you wish to combine skills and make them stronger? He agrees, thinking that the more blessings, the better, even if they aren't great. After all, Monarch blessings do not reset and continue in the next season. In the long run, they are worth more than skill cards. Kang asks, should I go to a fire attribute tower to complement the new blessing? Blackie responds, I hate fire. He suggests go to a dark and cold place. Kang chuckles, you're quite demanding. Then the system warns, the Sacred Tower and Jew are calling you. The accessory of unknown rank is exerting its powerful influence. Will you answer the call? Kang realizes he won't have his moment of rest, but it's not a bad thing, so he accepts. After this, he goes straight to the tower. When he arrives, the princess says, the goddess of shadows heard your prayers, and you have answered her call. Kang immediately recognizes her as Princess Syria, the same one he rescued before, and he notices that she is now in a higher position. She is no longer a princess, but a queen. Syria says she has a debt to the protagonist that cannot be described in words. He is there as an ally, so her guards should not show hostility. Kang realizes that the last tower ended with her being crowned queen. He asks how he can help this time, as he is unsure why the current queen would need his help. She says that the Holy Land has been taken over by the Elven Kingdom of Io. After that, the Pope died of heartbreak. The new one took over and made an appeal to the human kings to unite their forces and reclaim the territory. Soon, the Third Holy War between the desert elves and humans began. Kang realizes it is a religious conflict and thinks it could all be resolved with some kind of agreement. But Syria says the kings of 3 nations have sent their armies. Their target is likely the fortress they're now in, the closest to the Holy Land. Then she asks if the protagonist will fight by her side in this war. Before responding, Kang spots the King of Malice standing on the horizon. Syria is impressed that he can see this despite being so far away. Regardless, the protagonist uses his secondary deck and exchanges glasses for an ice beam. With this, he prepares to attack from a distance and tells the queen, "You don't have to worry about a thing." After that, a human evil surveys the area around them. The protagonist moves closer to the enemy, and with his weapon, he gets an expanded view of things. He promptly begins firing from a distance. The humans quickly raise their shields. As such, the protagonist's shots don't hit them, as they are absorbed by the energy of the shields. Kang wonders if those shields were blessed by the Fire Monarch. All he did was accept a gift from the snowman, and now the Fire One keeps appearing. Not only that, but a squad spreads out to find the protagonist. Then Kang gives up on long-range attacks, deciding to engage in hand-to-hand combat. He descends from the ridge, falling directly in front of the enemy. However, he's not alone, as the elves also attack firing arrows. The search squad leader says we need to find the visitor first, claiming that no arrow can break their shields. However, he was more than wrong. The protagonist had helped the elves before, and they realized that enemy forces must now be waning. Some soldiers still think the protagonist is the Apostle of Light. They wonder why he is on the side of their enemies. Kang uses Blackie and his dark magic to attack, but the cat himself is surprised by something. The leader of the humans advances and tells the others not to back down. "He is Richard, the king of malice," he says. "Do not turn your backs on our god." Eventually, the king sees a giant shadow approaching, about to swallow his army. But even so, he does not give up. Follow God's will, he commands his soldiers. With his sword, he breaks through the dark barrier and advances toward the enemies. His strength and determination infect everyone, something that catches the protagonist off guard. The enemies charge at the protagonist, determined to defeat him. Kang sees this up close, but when he's about to retaliate, attacks come from the other direction. The elves appear. One of them tells the protagonist to keep his eyes on the target. By the orders of our queen, we confront the humans head-on. Kang realizes that their squad has its own fanatics. Both sides face each other directly, and the battle between humans and elves intensifies. And soldiers from both sides die. However, the humans do not fare better. The elves move faster than the knights until the king of the humans appears and defeats several elves. But he is after something bigger. The protagonist realizes this too and says, "I'm going to balance things out now." Soon, the two finally start to fight. However, even the king of humans still sees the protagonist as an apostle who turned against them. He asks, "Who do you think you're facing?" Kang simply responds, "You're my enemy, the one I have to defeat to get a reward." He adds, "I want to see if you have a dragon heart." Kang attaches the mark of death to the king until the system warns that the exposed weaknesses debuff has been applied to the target. The hit, defense, and dodge modifiers have been reduced by 500. The king then says, "I will not fall before an insect like you." He kills his own horse and uses its blood to strengthen himself. This scares the protagonist, given that the king suffered a debuff and shouldn't be this strong. In turn, the king uses the strength he obtained to try to defeat his opponent. Kang uses his secondary deck to exchange Ice Beam for sword manipulation. Their battle becomes even more intense. The protagonist uses his swords, controlled by his mind, combined with his dark powers. From the ground, bloody souls emerge, taking over the king's body. Kang believes that the bloodstream has become stronger due to the carnage around the battlefield. As the conditions are met, his system specifies the range of the area effect of the ability. Afterwards, he orders the bodies to rise. With this, the dead knights return to the fight. Meanwhile, the king breaks free from his bonds, shouting, "You cannot stop me with these bizarre tricks." But the king is startled to see what the protagonist has done. For the men who died have risen, and those who are dying now are joining them. Thus, the men who were once with the king join the protagonist to fight against him. Soon, the king is desolate and cries out to his own. Meanwhile, the protagonist's system warns that the area of effect is too large for his necromancy aptitude. As a result, the ability to control the dead is deactivated. Finally, the protagonist defeats the enemy king. Later, before sunset, Kang takes the enemy's head to the Queen of the Elves. Queen Syria thanks him for his services. But they say they have defeated only one of the three pagan kings, and the jihad, the bloody war, has only just begun. Night falls on the kingdom, and the protagonist takes a moment to enjoy the view. But something feels different in the breeze, as if blood is spreading along with the wind. This totally breaks the mood. Kane decides to return inside the castle. As he walks, an NPC vendor appears to talk to him. She says, "You've reached the highest level for the frozen sword creation ability. If you decide to upgrade the shop, you'll be able to buy a waking stone." Kane nods. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he replies. The protagonist had already expected the vendor. "You wouldn't climb a tier 7 tower just for some half-decent business," he says. So he agrees to upgrade the shop. Upon doing so, he receives an ability called Frostsmith, which comes with very interesting attributes. The next day, the protagonist returns to battle. he takes the opportunity to test his new ability. With ease, he freezes the enemies and enjoys every moment of it. They must love sinning, he mutters, watching their captain. His army is getting crushed, yet the captain remains locked in his tent. Soon enough, if he doesn't get out, Kang says he won't have any other choice but to go in. Before the battle, the queen said she had received news that Bloodbeard had secretly led his special troops and set up camp nearby. Kang praised the effectiveness of the elf spies, but the queen replied it was the humans themselves who leaked this information. She continued, the three kings who participated in the Holy War have never been on good terms. Apparently, they're still arguing behind the scenes. Whether this was true or not, it was a good chance to strike. Barbara Rowe, the strongest of the three kings, was the queen's main concern. She asked, can you lead your elite men against him? Back in the present, the protagonist said, I was planning to kill the king in secret just to be safe. The information seemed correct, but the target was nowhere to be found. Then Kang entered the tent and saw the king hiding. He asked, why are you doing this? The king suddenly collapsed in front of him. He had been holding a drinking glass, which he dropped to the floor. The protagonist noticed the glass and suspected it might be poisoned. Kang soon realized that the king had died even before the war started. One of the elves approached and saw the same thing. Kang thought to himself, the real enemy is right in front of us. Since the first season, they have made nations wage war on each other, sending assassins to kill strong players from other nations and only caring about their own interests, just like certain people out there. The protagonist is frustrated and finds all of this ridiculous. After this, he returns to the queen and says the king was poisoned by someone on his own side. Siri asks, did the information leak to anyone else? Kang imagines the king wanted some insurance, but the queen doesn't believe he'd do that, especially with the Holy War so close. But the protagonist says that's exactly why he gets all the glory and breaks the balance between the three nations, killing 2 rabbits at once. Anyway, the queen says now we have to face the forces of the Supreme King. However, Kang claims that the remaining army will not return. After all, the troops were sent to a holy war. Without a king to lead them, they must have gathered somewhere, not far from here, in the human camp. One of them says the pagan assassins who attacked Bloody Beard annihilated his knights. It is also said they may be responsible for the king's death. Philip II, the Supreme King, says, this shall be soon. The fallen king's troops will now follow my orders. After all, a devout king of malice and the rich Bloody Beard were defeated by the pagans. One of theirs says Philip might claim the Holy Land and everyone will serve him. King Philip not only agrees with this, but also claims to have received a divine revelation, so he believes his will is the same as God's. With this, he aims to encourage a feeling of vengeance among the soldiers. For that, he says they need to put the forces of the King of Malice and Bloody Beard on the front lines. Philip asserts that the Angel of Faith is on his side. Therefore, his men should not doubt anything. Sometime later, the protagonist faces another army. He sees that the King of Malice's cavalry and Bloody Beard's armored infantry have united, turning into a large army. Not only that, but they are all using the same flag. Therefore, the protagonist realizes Philip is behind it. In the name of their beliefs, the human army prepares to attack. Kane mentions they use slogans that seem to have been taken from a history book, and he wonders if they really believe in the peace achieved by killing all their enemies. Either way, he also prepares for battle and activates a buff called Westwind, bought in the store, which will be active until the end of this battle. With that, he showers the wind across the battlefield, not only blowing, but bringing along a freezing breeze. The soldiers spot the protagonist and are thirsty for revenge. Their leader says to the others, do not perish against the blizzard, including the king who stands at the front but stays behind the army. Just like the other human leaders, Philip has the blessing of the Monarch of Fire, and he uses this to influence his army. On the other side, the Shadow Monarch grants his blessing to the elves. Not only that, but the faction Dark Council has joined the battle. The Monarch of the Blizzard also decided to bless the Vezd, and the faction Glacial Guardians influences the battlefield in their favor. Seeing everything from afar, the protagonist questions this war. He wonders, is all this really the will of God? Kane can't tell if there is only one deity or many. Either way, he thinks that if there is a God out there, he's probably an evil being. Black Heat tells Kane, stop the nonsense and just do your job. The protagonist says his cat is right and finally decides to join the fight, looking to end this war. The protagonist's system issues an alert, telling him not to disappoint the council and informing him that he will temporarily have 100 shadow puppets to use. With so much support in the battle, Kang was indeed impressed. He realized that it wasn't just him wanting to win, but that his opponent's side seemed just as determined. On the human side, there were 59 ranked Sentinel Angels. Kang decided to let the puppets take care of the angels, focusing entirely on his confrontation with the opponent. Next, he faced King Philip. The two clashed, but something unexpected happened. The protagonist realized that Philip's equipment resembled that of a player. However, Philip spoke as if he were a character, not a player. This led Kang to think that Philip might not be a player after all, but rather the original owner of the golden fanaticism. Suddenly, Philip attacked from above. Kang didn't like this, commenting, "Now everyone has wings on their back." However, an alert from the system interrupted his thoughts. The Shadow Monarch has granted you the Raven Wings buff. Kang could now fly, but he wasn't pleased. "I didn't ask for wings," he muttered. The fight, once part of his carefully planned strategy, now felt like a set of useless cards. The only one who seemed to enjoy the change was Philip, who grinned and claimed, "Now I have a worthy opponent." And so, the two began their fight in the sky. "You seem to be struggling," Philip remarked. "This is your punishment for betraying God's will." Kang decides to provoke him, asking, "Was poisoning Bloody Beard also God's will?" His opponent scoffs, "You're resorting to cheap tricks. I won't fall for that. Everything I do is God's will." Philip then proclaims, "I am a seraphim. This means my will is the same as God's." He attempts to attack the protagonist, but ends up striking an ice clone. Kang appears from behind and comments, "Wings are a nuisance. They block your vision." He strikes Philip from behind. However, his system alerts him that the rank 8 Seraph has the body of the Supreme King. Philip's body begins to glow, and a large explosion erupts, knocking the protagonist away. The part of Philip's body that was hit regenerates. He resurfaces, halo above his head, his wings even more magnificent than before. Kang watches in disbelief, thinking angels are stealing bodies now. His system alerts again. The Fire Destroyers faction imbued the Sword of Light with infernal flames, while the Glacial Guardians faction imbued the Ice Sword with the Chill Key of Cassidus. This gives Kane a force equal to that of his opponent. Suddenly, it starts to rain. As the rain falls on the soldiers on the ground, high above, the two opponents confront each other. The battle is intense for both. Kang struggles to fight while flying until, in a careless act, the enemy manages to cut off one of his wings. Philip thinks he has the upper hand and takes the opportunity to attack the protagonist. He uses all his strength to try to defeat his adversary, but Kang still has a card up his sleeve. He uses Blackie to pierce Philip with his spikes. Not only that, but Kang also uses his mentally controlled swords to cause even greater damage. This way, he manages to escape being killed and finally defeats King Philip. His system alerts him that he killed the one who had the body of an archangel. With the fight finally over, he tears off the other wing he has, claiming he no longer needs it. From the ground, some soldiers see something falling, and when they realize what it is, they are shocked. It was their own king. Not only Philip, but the other angels also fall. The protagonist's system alerts him that the flow of the story has been distorted. The altered story is modifying the player's historic equipment. Kang won the suit that Philip wore as soon as he defeated him. In addition to earning 10,000 conquest points, at the end of the day, he is glad that it's all over. Therefore, he returns to the real world and is immediately surrounded by several reporters. Kang is confused. He entered the tower from inside his house but did not return the same way. Upon seeing that he is in a different suit, several questions arise. However, Kang is not in the mood to answer any of them. Meanwhile, his manager comes running, but upon seeing the protagonist, he notices that Kang looks different. Kang decides to speak to the press. He says people love heroic deeds and are desperate to hear that I've passed my prime. He also says, "I feel ashamed at times and wonder why I go through so much to protect the world." And since he was so provoked to speak, he asks, "By any chance, do you like war that much?" This question leaves those present utterly captivated. Kang continues saying, "War is having molten iron poured on you as you scale castle walls, being hit by arrows, being cut open, and watching your guts spill out." But he mentions, "We are now in the 21st century, and for this reason, I want to justify this era." So he mentions the missiles falling from the sky, bullets going through people and fighters bombing innocents. However, one way or another, the part about the guts spilling out of the body remains the same. That's why he reinforces what he said before and asks again, "Do you like war?" Some say it's impossible to like that there's no one who likes war, even being the one who wins or loses, because in all scenarios, war is horrible. Meanwhile, Kang remembers what happened before he left the tower. The queen told him she was happy with his revenge, but now she was scared. So he asked, "What made you so frightened?" Syria said that the end of this war, the blood and the deaths, left a horrible scene. All of this makes her wonder if this is really what their goddess wanted. Kang also came to the same conclusion back in the present. He says it's impossible for anyone to like war, but he asks, "Do you like heroes?" The people respond affirmatively. Then the protagonist asks, "How do you think heroes come to be called as such?" The answer is confronting enemies and performing well in wars, because there cannot be heroes without wars to face. Therefore, he concludes that in the end, people like wars, even though they do not admit it. Journalists say that this statement is as extreme as it is wrong, that the situation is merely a product of the time being incompatible with the present. But Kang says that it's not quite like that, given the neighbors to the north are sending assassins to kill them as if they were a festival. This is not only war, but also espionage. With this, reporters ask if foreign assassins have already tried to kill Kang. The protagonist pretends to have mistakenly leaked this information and claims it was confidential. They try to extract more details, but the protagonist has already gotten what he wanted, intrigued them with a topic that was hidden until then. He says that as he thought about the war, one thing came to his mind. He asks, even if the world ended tomorrow, wouldn't we still keep fighting each other? He also says they say it's fair. Players become the nation's strength, being used as weapons of war. Players raise their swords not against the world's enemy, but against their nation's enemy. Kang says that even without him or the other war heroes, they seem to believe they can conclude the season. And he says the reporters seem to believe in this lie. So he asks, why does he have to go through so much hardship? Precisely to save a world that does not need him. All this agonist speech is broadcasted live around the world. Important people from various nations listen to what he is saying, and some are slightly worried until a reporter steps forward, arguing that it's worth fighting for. Kang asks, why? He and others argue that innocent people can't be sacrificed, and that a player can't recklessly abandon their responsibility. Kang responds, everyone can be both a hero or a villain. It's up to each person to decide which role they will play. But then he is interrupted. His manager grabs him by the arm, pulling him away from the cameras. It's official business, the manager claims. Before leaving, the protagonist gives his final warning. Others should not talk about a player's duty or convictions. If an ignorant person like me had convictions, I wouldn't take responsibility for the mess the world is in. Make sure to broadcast that. His attitude greatly pleases the clown monarch. Meanwhile, Park says, I'm taking you home. But Kang only wants to know about the rewards he received. His system alerts him that he has received a legendary item, an amulet, and the ability to strip enemies, but he doesn't want to check that right now. Sometime later, they arrive home and see that the protagonist's speech is already resonating around the world. Park decides to just rest a bit and drink a cold one to calm down. He asks why the protagonist is listening to the news and questions whether it's fear since he caused a lot of turmoil. Kane is just surprised his manager isn't angry at him. Park says he couldn't be angry since he clearly perceives that Kane isn't well. Nobody knows you better than me, he adds. Kane mentions he has an acquaintance in France, but his friend says he's on a level totally above hers. Anyway, the protagonist says thanks and his friend is happy for the recognition. He asks, which class are you currently in? Park answers, I'm in the Pure Blood Assassins class, indicating he recently awakened. Then he shows the equipment he acquired, including a heart-cutting dagger, a legendary weapon. Park mentions hearing that Kang corrupted a legendary ranked piece of equipment. Kang says things just ended up that way, so if his friend suggests you should take a break or you'll end up seriously hurting yourself. He adds, we've got a tier 7 tower waiting for us. Park's idea of rest is indeed curious. Anyway, already inside the tower, he tells his friend to get ready. Betrayal, secret feuds, and the incompetent wickedness of the organization await you. The protagonist says it's time to change the genre of the story, and thus, they enter the Godfather and Alley Tower. Elsewhere, in the middle of the heavy rain, a woman hands something over to another person. She says, finish this before the meeting. The other person takes the item and she adds, don't forget that this is for the good of the justice of this world. Afterward, the woman checks the time and realizes her watch has stopped. She becomes saddened as the watch was a gift from her godfather. Nearby, Kang and Park try to take shelter from the rain. The woman recognizes the two of them and asks for help. This is the city of Black York, she says. The Capone family is in crisis. She tells them, your job is to fix this. The woman then instructs them to follow her, saying she will take them to her boss. As they walk, she explains, Black York is governed by the 5 great families of the Underworld. In 4 days, there will be a meeting between several important companies. But not long ago, the first Godfather, the former head of the Capone family, and many members of his organization were killed. She continues, I used to be an orphan, wandering the streets when I was young. I was lucky to awaken my powers, but they were not very useful. Until her life changed when her godfather adopted her. Kang does not seem very interested in this part of the story. Anyway, she says that during the attack, she was only able to save one person, the godfather's son, the current head of the organization. As soon as they enter the room, the boss greets the visitors, stating that he is the leader of this company and also the head of the Capone family. Park then says he is the little boss. Soon, the boy gets irritated, saying this is a rude way to address Vego Capone, a great boss and the rightful heir of his family. The woman tries to calm him down, saying these foreigners do not know how to judge character, and claims that his presence as a boss exudes respect. The boy, his ego soothed, then says, I do not have much time and I want to get straight to business. Then he tells Rebecca to carry out the procedures. Kang, who has not spoken until now, just observes everything. After talking for a bit, Rebecca says, to simplify, our goal is to resurrect the Capone family. At the meeting between the 5 great families in 4 days, we need to attract as much attention as possible and discover the culprits and the mastermind behind the assassination of the former boss and his executives. Kang asks, who do they suspect? Rebecca says the most likely culprit would be one of the leaders of the other great families or someone who is part of their alliance. The main suspect is Gambino. He is weak now and seems to want a war. The protagonist looks at all the files and asks, should I kill all of them? Rebecca says, it's not a bad idea. We would eventually eliminate all the Capone's enemies anyway. However, Kang says, I think the boss does not agree with you. Vito, in a way, agrees and claims the Capones have always been great, but only reached their peak with my father. I have observed Rebecca for 20 years. Her methods are the very essence of the Capone family. There is no need for a different perspective. Kang says, the boss is Vito, not this woman. He's the one who has to make the decisions. Vito responds, I know, but Rebecca knows more than I do. Then the protagonist asks, do you want to kill the rivals as well? Honestly, the boy replies, if they weren't responsible, I think it's better to maintain the current relationship. Then he asks Rebecca, can we do that? She does not seem very pleased, but agrees with the boy, stating that he is the boss. After starting the mission, Park suggests investigating the Kyo family, saying that they are the closest to where they are. With this, Khan comments that his friend is looking like a villain. Park says that they have to try living like villains at some point. After all, this world is a game. A little later, some guards prepare to fight, wondering who dares to invade the Kyo family's territory. But they do not have time to react as the 2 friends attack. Park says that they can surrender while they are still alive, and those who cooperate will be spared. However, they do not agree to this, claiming that they would never betray their family. If that is the case, Park says, you can die now. Kang looks at his friend and realizes that he is completely at ease. Suddenly, a more nervous man appears, asking how they dare attack his family before the meeting. Park asks, is that man the head of the Kyo family? One of the men responds that their boss would not lower himself to this. Then he tells the protagonist to have fun facing those henchmen, but Kang does not understand as the plan was for them to go together. However, Park says that his friend came there with the goal of resting. Then he states that this time he will take care of the task. Kang is surprised by this but agrees, saying that he will clear the way for his friend to advance. Then Park moves forward, stating that he will take down the boss. The protagonist is left alone with the remaining henchmen, and from above, someone watches his actions. Like a crow, this person moves inside the enemy organization's headquarters. Park is clean up until he and the protagonist notice something flying nearby. Kang only sees a flock of crows. In the last chapter, the Kyo family was destroyed. Now the next target is the Gambino family. The protagonist sees the whole place being destroyed. And if you're wondering what your friend is doing, pausing to think, you conclude that it's been a long time since you saw him in combat. Even thinking they are alike, Kang doesn't want to show this side of him to Park. He strokes Blackie and tells him not to leave any leftovers. The cat comments that this is very convenient for Kang, who is leaving all the heavy work for him. Anyway, they end up there and go to a diner. Park calls his friend lazy because since they arrived there, Kang only eats hamburgers. Burgers every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The protagonist justifies himself, saying that the hamburgers there are the best and that he wants to eat as much as he can before going back home. Park insists, saying there are other food options, but Kang replies that he hardly ever takes a vacation and doesn't want to ruin it by worrying about what to eat. He changes the subject and asks, what did Gambino's boss say? The manager simply says, the boss doesn't know anything. Kang recalls that Park had asked him to entrust this task to him, but the manager adds that the boss won't do anything at the meeting anyway. Speaking of which, the Gambino boss is furious. He makes several calls and gets no answers. Not from Sanchez, nor from the Falconeses. He worries about this and considers the possibility that their alliance might have been broken. Gambino is literally spitting blood, and he knows exactly who's to blame. He remembers that before leaving, the man who attacked him had said that in 72 hours, the flow of his heart's blood would stop and the organ would explode unless it was restarted by pressing the pressure point. Park had asked the leader, do you understand what I'm talking about? Then the boss had said the Gambino family would not participate in the meeting this time. Decides he agreed to cooperate to apprehend those responsible for the death of Capone. With that, Park said he is smart and will let him live this time, and then he left. However, the manager was still in great pain since the procedure that Park promised had not been performed yet because the meeting had not occurred. Knowing this, Kang simply says, we have nothing. The manager tries to calm his friend and says, "We will find out something in the meeting." It's just a guess, but he feels there is someone else beyond the 5 great families. Sometime later, the great moment arrives. The families begin to arrive at the meeting place, and they wait until everyone comes to the table. Then, Marcellus, the boss of the Cayo family, says, "It's getting late." The boss of the Gambino family says, 2 did not show up. Vito says that Falcon and Sanchez did not appear and immediately deduces that they were responsible for killing his father. Rebecca tells him, "Don't jump to conclusions," and advises him to observe everything first before acting. The boy agrees, saying, "You're always the wisest," until suddenly someone appears claiming to have urgent news. Meanwhile, Park and Kang observe everything from afar. The man who just entered reveals that the heads of the Falconese and Sanchez were killed. Kang then says, "It appears we have another enemy." Park replies, "No wonder the 5 families seem weak." Kang says, "I thought I was getting stronger," but his friend cuts him off. Suddenly, the lights in the place are turned off, leaving only one on shining on the stage. A mysterious hooded figure steps forward and says, "How convenient for you all to be here together. Just the disgusting trash that stains this city." He continues, "You deal with corrupt politicians, manipulate the workers' union to exploit their wages. You lie and deceive under all kinds of pretexts. You're despicable criminals who incite chaos in this city." The mysterious figure points out all their crimes and declares, "My name is Night Knight. I will execute justice." Vigo asks, "Was it the Night Raven who killed the other bosses?" The figure responds, "Yes. They were cruel villains and their deaths were a small price to pay." He adds, "The same happened to your father." He then says coldly, "The same will happen to you since you are the son of a villain." At that moment, the Raven attacks, throwing feathers as projectiles. Rebecca protects Vito, shouting, "Don't expose yourself to danger." The boy, eyes filled with rage and sorrow, says, "The Raven killed my father, and for that, he seeks revenge." She says, "I know that," and asserts, "For the sake of this world, a price must be paid." Immediately, the protagonist's system alerts that the anti-hero, Night Crow, is executing justice. Kang then says, "There's no shortage of villains who deserve this punishment." In this, he uses the dark magic and Blackie to attack, confirming that the true villain all along was the Raiden King. The protagonist attacks the Raven with dark magic, leaving the adversary in a tight spot. However, the Raven manages to find an opening to counterattack, and Blackie says the protagonist will end up killing him. Kang sees that his cat is being sliced too easily, and thinks, "I should feed it better." Then he decides to act faster. He grips his opponent by the cloak and hits him with his magic. Thus, the Raven is left with a death mark, suffering a debuff that exposes his weaknesses. The protagonist also uses the keyword gossip, which grants details in the target's attribute window and allows the debuff to expose weaknesses to be stacked again. With this, unwittingly, the enemy reveals that negative energy is seeping out of his cloak. His sharp feathers can be dangerous, and he carries several small devices meant to disrupt or distract his opponent. Unaware of the truth, the Raven is fighting against a dark clone of the protagonist. Meanwhile, as every move is being closely monitored, Kang wonders, why would someone dressed like that dare to pose as a hero? The Raven realizes he is at a disadvantage and asks, "Are you an outsider?" but receives no answer. Even so, he decides to act, controlling multiple Ravens on the screen, coordinating them to break through every obstacle in their way. Park wonders, why are there so many of them? He is an expert in one-on-one combat, but now finds himself in a completely different situation. Meanwhile, Kang is confronting the Raven directly. The protagonist says, "The leaders are the Parks, and I must protect them at all costs." Kang adds, "My friend is much better at protecting than I am." Park, however, disagrees with that statement. Nevertheless, Kang says, "Taking down opponents is my specialty, and that's exactly what I intend to do." Raven interjects, "Outsiders should be fighting for world peace. Why are you acting like tools of evil?" Kang doesn't understand what he means by peace and alliance. The Raven replies, "I have no idea what your enemies told you to make you believe that." He accuses his opponents of contributing to the downfall of the Capone family, yet avoiding accountability by influencing powerful figures in the city and benefiting from others' reluctance to challenge them. He adds that this reveals the city's true nature, and that is why he and his allies are determined to pursue justice. The Raven replies, "It's not too late. I fight for this city and for justice." He tries to convince the protagonist to join forces against those he considers to be in the wrong, but Kang refuses and skillfully takes the opportunity to respond. Kang remarks that the Raven talks too much instead of taking action and admits he dislikes facing someone who hides their identity. However, when the Raven's face is revealed, Kang is surprised to see that it is just a young boy. The Raven says, "Don't underestimate my belief in justice." He then activates a device that creates an unexpected distraction. He adds, "The woman told me about the meeting point 3 days ago. How many such devices do you think I've set up?" The protagonist is caught off guard by the situation and nearly gets drawn into it, but with Blackie's help, he and his friend manage to retreat to safety. From a distance, the explosion could be seen. The next day, once things had settled, they regrouped. Rebecca thanked them for their loyalty, saying that thanks to their efforts, most of the businesses that had attended the meeting were now under the Capone family's control. Kang said the boy had survived and that they had achieved exactly what Rebecca had wanted. Rebecca agreed, adding, "With this, our work is done." However, the protagonist asked, "In the end, wasn't all of this part of your plan?" The woman replied, "And what does that have to do with you?" The protagonist said, "My duty is to eliminate threats to the Capone family. If you were involved in the downfall of the family's leader and even hired an outsider to strike at the heads of other families, that puts you in opposition to us." Rebecca answered that he had no proof, but Kang asserted, "The Raven himself said you provided information about the family. That helped you remove competition, put the boy in charge, and become the most influential person in Black York." Rebecca said, "It's not exactly like that. I did it all for Vito, a boy who is truly kind and pure-hearted." She had removed those she believed were forcing the boy to become a successor, along with other perceived threats, all to protect him from the harshness of the world. Rebecca believed she had only done what any guardian should do. But Kang said she had betrayed the one who had once helped her and had used his son to seize power. Park stepped in, saying she was no guardian at all, as her actions had made the boy dependent and served only her own interests. Rebecca replied that no outsider had the right to judge her. Park then suggested asking the boy's opinion. At that moment, Rebecca realized that Vito had been listening the whole time. He became emotional upon learning the truth. She tried to justify herself, but Vito surprised everyone by revealing that he possessed abilities and used them to restrain her. Vito said, "You were right. The world really is harsh." After that, they completed the mission and returned home. Park felt a little regret that it hadn't been the kind of heroic adventure he had hoped for. Kang, on the other hand, enjoyed returning without being surrounded by the press. His companion suggested we should do this again until their assistant appeared, saying there was a new problem. The Tier 5 tower in the center of Su is on the verge of a severe collapse. Hearing this, even the protagonist feels uneasy. This is one of the Tier 5 towers that the association's players had previously attacked. They failed on their first attempt and retreated safely, but one of them said, "Everyone will lose 3 merit points for failing," which meant they would be downgraded. Another suggested, "We can fix this. Let's complete the challenge in hard mode," which worried the rest of the group. He argued that they had come this far with great effort, and none of them wanted to return to the starting point and become dependent on the association. They needed to remove the penalty, and the only way was to choose hard mode. They then attempted a second raid on hard difficulty, but were completely defeated. On the way there, Kang said, "I've heard about the association's merit and penalty system, but I don't think this is fair. Tower breakdowns are rare, but during the first and second seasons, such incidents happen fairly often. Back then, there was no effective method for raids and failure was common. The results brought significant losses and serious consequences. In the past, many of his loved ones, including the protagonist's family, had been caught in serious incidents both before and after he became a player. However, he now believes things have changed. Determined, he decides to unlock all unused equipment and skill packages. His current setup is already strong, but he refuses to leave any gap that could put him at risk. Preparing for a major challenge, he assembles a new skill deck. After a car ride, he arrives at the location. The moment he steps out, the people around become excited, seeing that the Hero King has come to help. Yet his mind is fixed only on the challenges ahead. He notices a strange black hole forming in the sky. The people, already uneasy, grow even more anxious. Some players ready themselves to confront what's coming, but the protagonist steps forward and says, "Anyone meeting the following conditions should leave immediately. First, those who might accidentally get caught in my skill. Second, anyone not confident they can keep up with me. And third, everyone except me." With that, the other players retreat, leaving the protagonist to take full control. Kang stands before a long line of opponents. He begins to move backwards, skillfully neutralizing each opponent in his path. He notices that the area is becoming increasingly overrun with strange creatures. In addition, he spots something he can identify. Based on the tower's name, he assumes that the enemies the players had previously faced were the inhabitants of the kingdom inside it. This would mean the creatures emerging from the tower break might not be directly related. He wonders where they are coming from, until a news helicopter approaches the site to cover the event. The reporter says the Hero King is a controversial figure, but when it comes to skill, he gets the job done. Then he receives an alert. The Monarch of the Abyss is awakening the darkness from the depths. The reporter continues, the portal is changing color and speculates that this could be a sign of the Abyss creature's arrival. The protagonist wonders how such a being could come from a tower like this. Stepping forward, he tells the helicopter crew, "Leave now before you're caught by the creatures." As he moves ahead, he wonders whether the Monarch acted independently until his system alerts him. The Abyss Slime has appeared. Kang had anticipated something like this, so he immediately launches his counterattack, thinking to himself, will this be enough? Then he concludes that he needs to finish it in one hit, so he charges an ice attack mixed with shadow skills combined with Charlotte's web skill. In this way, he connects 2 points with a plot of death, possessing extreme cutting power. After using all this combined, he defeats the Abyss Slime. The tower's break was interrupted. The Abyss Monarch granted him a gem as proof of his satisfaction. When he returns to the real world, the whole local press surrounds him, as always, seeing that the Hero King prevented the tower's break alone. The news about the incident spreads everywhere. Kang, somewhat frustrated, blames the association. Apparently, the dead players failed the raid and were afraid of being penalized. Hence, their actions provoked it, and the tower broke. The press questioned the association, and the answer they got was that the association admitted part of the blame, but tried to justify itself. To the protagonist, what matters is that the press cracked down on the association. He celebrates with his friend. Park, moreover, says they need to use this chance to purify the association. The protagonist asks if his friend is going to run for president or something like that. He responds that he is not and says he is talking about creating a guild. Kang says the law prevents them from establishing guilds, claiming that a nation should have only one guild, so it will be hard to do that. His friend replies, that's why we need to use this chance to change that rule. We could take advantage of all the absurdities committed by the association, especially since they've never entered a tower and yet still established rules about them. Not to mention they only promote those with sponsorship and neglect the others. If we use public opinion in our favor, we can reverse this situation. The protagonist wishes his friend luck. Park, however, says, this is my business too. Kane disagrees and says, this is your doobie, not mine. But his friend disagrees completely. He insists people are on the side of the Hero King. He should be the one to create the guild. A while later, the petition to allow the creation of another guild surpasses 170,000 signatures, but the existing guild refuses to admit it. Regarding public opinion, the Hero King and the veteran players are rising, but the association's president dislikes that. He is sure that the protagonist and his manager are behind this, claiming that both don't understand the danger normal players represent to civilians. He thinks that in some countries, the government is lax and the guilds are linked with the underworld. Some nations have even turned into the dominions of dark players. Even the USA, which allows private player guild formations, controls its top players with the military. The president considers players as walking bombs that, without ideal management, become impossible to control. Thus, he concludes that those against this are simple-minded people who don't understand how the world works. Until he gets a call, his system alerts that the wicked monarch is interested in him and asks the president if he is interested in accepting the tower challenge. Far from there, an announcement from the protagonist occurs. People note that this is his armor from the previous season and wonder why this advertisement is still being broadcast. For his part, the protagonist thinks about the creation of this new guild. In every way, Park tried to convince him to create it, but Kang, at the time, pointed out several problems. Then his friend told him not to worry about the details, as he just needed to assume the leadership position and leave the background tasks to his manager. Park stated that to create a better world, they need the Hero King, because he is the only one who can do that. Kang kept this in mind and wondered why the Hero King always went to the front lines before others. He thought his real duty was to complete towers. The protagonist used his system to find towers at his level, but found none. Then he decided to turn off his GPS, thinking there were several ways to enter towers without having to search for them. One of these ways was receiving an amulet from them and waiting for their call. Upon completing the last mission, he received an amulet from the boss. Kang knew that these objects were a means of connecting the tower world with the outside world, but he had a hunch that he wouldn't be called on anytime soon. So he figured he could only wait. Then suddenly an alert was issued throughout the city. It stated that a tower of departure would be established in moments. Soon, people would be able to savor the performance of the top rankings of the 5th season in a live broadcast. The protagonist didn't quite understand what this was, but his system alerted him that the Clown Monarch was very eager for his participation. Meanwhile, organizations from various places tried to understand what this tower was all about, as information about it was scarce and everything would be broadcast live. But there was a catch if the participating players failed in the challenge. 100 million random people will die. Kang was frightened at first, but this was the motivation he needed. He then appeared ready for action and agreed to participate in this mysterious tower. At the same time, he and other players from around the world entered the tower. There Kang met some acquaintances. Upon seeing these players, he said, I can hardly contain my joy. It's been a while since I've seen all of you together. The Sing approached him to greet him. Kang asked, "Are you wearing some sort of cosplay?" She smiled and replied, "No, but I like seeing you in your normal version." Kang laughed and asked, "When was I ever different?" The saint mentioned what had happened after the 7th-tier tower raid. She added, "I was worried when I saw the broadcast. You seemed exhausted." Kang realized she was genuinely concerned about him, but he reassured her, saying, "I'm fine. I won't stop going on raids." Just then, another player approached. "If Kang isn't feeling well, he should leave now," he said. Claiming to be the last Hero King, he asked, "How can the top ranker be the last to arrive?" Kang replied, "I couldn't consider that when 100 million lives are at stake." The protagonist smirked and asked, "Were you expecting a cliché response?" Like the last one to arrive is the one who saves the day, the player states. But the first to arrive are always the first to face danger. Kane provokes him, asking, "Did you rehearse that line?" He then claims, "You don't care about anything. You're just pretending." The player doesn't appreciate this, and they both start arguing. An older player, however, interrupts the conversation. Kang asks, "How dare you show up without the appropriate equipment?" The player replies, "It isn't the start of the season yet. I believe no one will die in this tower. After all, we're being watched by people around the world." After that, the system alerts them that they will temporarily receive a 5th season end set of items until they leave the tower. With that, skills and equipment are distributed. The old man, Jordan Gravedigger, says this should decrease the chances of someone dying. He's the CEO of an artifacts company. With his help, the players get stronger and ready to act. Then a woman approaches Maria and can't believe they're playing mind games right now. This woman is Lydia, an international master player and a member of the police. She says men's maturity has no limit. The saint says they must realize how many lives depend on this tower raid. Lieutenant General Kilgore from the US joins the conversation and says that everyone should fulfill their duties to this planet and their nations. The Great Dicker tells the others to be careful with their actions there. In turn, Kang mentions they should have broadcasted during the Pestilence Lord raid. Suddenly, someone appears and greets them, apologizing for keeping them waiting. The masked one says this is a festival for them assembled to appreciate the killers of the Pestilence Lord. Then he welcomes the assembled hero. Kang asks, "Why is a monarch dead and this masked one is celebrating?" After all, they were friends. After this, the masked one tells the Hero King that it's better not to provoke the Monarchs. He asks, "Do you prefer to be called Monarch Slayer?" The protagonist earned this title by eliminating the season's boss. Hence, the Red Guardian, who is competing with Kang, refuses to acknowledge that a brat won that title and thinks something must be done about it. Anyway, the masked one says, "This is a celebration in honor of the players, and I hope you don't feel stressed." The Red Guardian attacks the masked one right after. "Is this a joke?" Kang asked. It's impossible to think of 100 million lives as a celebration. Kang watched the scene unfold, finding it pathetic. He asserted that the Red was only doing this to win the public's coronation. The masked man spoke up. "All your attacks are nullified," he said. "You shouldn't waste your energy. Now, I will explain the rules of this tower." With a snap of his fingers, he addressed the viewers. "Vote for your favorite player. Soon, it will be up to you to decide the hero of this tower." Kang's frustration grew. "They could easily rig the votes," he muttered. The masked one raised a finger to his lips. "Be careful with what you say," he warned. "We have rules to follow." He continued, his voice steady. "Our mission is simple. Garner the viewers' interest and entertain them. How you do this is entirely up to you. The number of votes you get will determine your points. However, if the votes are low or if you fail to hold the viewers' attention, the raid will be deemed a failure, and that means millions will die." The masked one's tone grew more urgent. "Do not stand idle. Use everything you have to create something interesting for the sake of the world." After his speech, the Red Guardian and Swordmaster made their move. They requested a duel in the arena with the Hero King. Kang says he is quick and asks, "Why do I need to fight?" The masked one replies, "You cannot reject the opponent's desire. Even if you die in the arena, you will be reborn here anyway." He creates the arena and adds, "The players cannot leave until the tower's voting is over." Before it starts, the protagonist hesitates and asks, "Does the Red One wish to fight me again after being crushed?" The masked one responds, "If I cannot defeat you, the votes will be useless to me, but I will make up for the loss on the first day of the season." With all this pent-up rage, he begins to attack. Kang, on the other hand, decides to provoke him. "The feeling of hitting rock bottom must be terrible," he says. His opponent takes the bait, attacking with greater intensity using the lone sword of the nine. The other players are astounded at what is happening. As the protagonist holds his own against the Red Guardian, he not only wields his sword, but also uses the same skills. The Gravedigger thinks that this can only be a skill copy. Even the Red One notices and wonders, did the Hero King have a contract with the Monarch of Mirrors? He claims, "I have devoted my entire life to this sword." So he does not understand how the protagonist is winning a duel against him. From outside the arena, the Gravedigger finds it magnificent to watch the Hero King fight. He asks, how can any of them kill the king? Lydia responds, why are you saying this? You're not the one fighting the Hero King. But the Gravedigger says, you need glasses. Those who are truly after the Hero King seem to be the other players. Realizing this, Lydia is baffled. She cannot understand how they still manage to act like this in such a situation. On the other hand, the Saint is the only one truly bothered by it. The Saint thinks that 100 million lives depend on the outcome of this tower. Yet, in the minds of others, they only think about defeating the Hero King and becoming the top players. She recalls Kang's speech where he said, even if the world seems about to end tomorrow, people continue to fight each other. So she concludes that Kang was right, for in the first and second seasons, everyone entered the tower solely to save the world. But now, times have changed. Maria wonders why. She thinks that even though the players get stronger each season, the tower tiers also increase annually, and the bosses are getting more powerful. Everyone uniting to save the world is just a fairy tale. Maria thinks she's no longer that young girl who just awakened, but even if the races are different, even if the religions are different, and even if the skin color is different, she believes that if they cannot unite even in a game with the world's destruction at stake, she wonders how they can save it in the first place. Back in the fight, the Red Guardian thinks this is definitely strange, for even though this game is unfair, he imagines he understands the protagonist. No matter how strong the Hero King is, there must be a reason. He surmises that Kang has a secret. Soon, he concludes that if he wants to uncover his power, he will be able to beat him. At this moment, the Red One doesn't even care if he loses to him. All he wants is to discover the secret of his opponent's strength. However, he's not having the upper hand. The protagonist says, you seem to have forgotten your place since I went easy on you. This greatly surprises the Red Guardian, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to attack him with a bit more force. Then the Red realizes that his opponent has more secrets than he thought. Next, Kang speaks out, I'm going to show the difference to anyone who dares to fight me again. Soon after, he executes a ground attack, which ravages a major part of the battlefield. The Red One is shocked by this, given that he had other plans in mind, but now, everything has gone downhill. Hang opens his secondary deck. Emerging from a sandstorm, he appears with a vastly different look. With that, everyone else is left in shock. The Red Guardian at this point no longer believes in his victory, for the protagonist manifests the mythical ability, the manifestation of the Celestial Demon. Cain manifests as a Celestial Demon. With 3 swords of the Celestial Demon, he takes on the first form, opening a dimensional chasm of power. It pierces his opponent from different directions. The Red Guardian is left leaking like a sieve. Kang now uses the 3 swords of the Celestial Demon in its second form, called Destruction. The other players are left flabbergasted. The Red Guardian was defeated so easily. The masked man then announces that the match is over and calls it magnificent, as expected from the Hero King. Following this, he says that the votes have started. The numbers begin to rise. The Red One still remains desolate, unlike the protagonist who acts as if it is no big deal. Now, he looks quite villainous. His entire appearance comes off as very dark. In fact, even the Gravedigger is taken aback since Kang Yoosung is entirely unrecognizable. Even the girls are startled when they see him. Unlike the audience who enjoys watching the protagonist, some observe that Kang has copied the equipment and abilities of the Gravedigger. 2 friends chat, and one wonders how the protagonist can be a human like them. His friend corrects him, saying that because of him, others are alive. Then the first one asks what the protagonist should be called, and the friend says that Kang should be simply called what he is. The Hero King Kang in turn asks the other players what's with their expressions and if it's their first time seeing his copying ability. The Gravedigger states that the protagonist cannot explain the manifestation of the Celestial Demon strictly with his copying ability. Lydia agrees and says that this ability is not a mere copy, as she has fought against another copy user before known as the Face Collector, the worst black player who hides his rank on purpose and copies his opponent to the extent of slicing their face and using it. Although it is similar, she says there is a limit. Kang says that it is obviously because he does not have just a copying ability, and asked if they are too curious about it, since both are keeping a poker face. But he agrees to tell them one thing, and he reveals to them his biggest secret. He made a pact with a monarch of truth. Kang says that is why he can't tell anything but the truth, even when the world is changing around him. The Gravedigger jerk says, judging by the protagonist's appearance, I guess he'll be my next opponent. However, Kang responds, I hate fighting more than anything in the world. I also hate idiots who are on the offensive without knowing their place. George Belnier asks, what are you planning? Kang says, from now on, I'm going to try and convince the audience with a single truth. The masked one steps in, arguing. Promoting oneself is basic for the voting. Following this, the stage starts to move and the protagonist prepares to speak. He tests the microphone and asks, "Is everyone paying attention?" He then declares, "You have no choice anyway, after all." He changes the channel himself when he sees his own face on TV. Regardless, he says, "There are 10 heroes gathered in the tower. Everyone should vote for one of them. If the votes are too few, 100 million people will earn a one-way ticket to beyond. Hence, everyone should understand the importance of voting." Kang also says that even the worst tyrants became presidents thanks to votes. If it goes wrong, it may happen the same with the heroes. Bilmir warns the protagonist to watch his words, but the protagonist asks, "What's the problem?" He also queries if Bilmir got annoyed with the part about the tyrant. He talks about how it can't be right that people revere Heroes National so much ever since the two of them fought. Upon noticing the discomfort with the old man, Kang sarcastically asks, was Bilmir's dream of reviving the Third Empire supposed to be a secret? The Gravedigger asks how Kang dares to insult someone without evidence. However, Kang responds that he has a contract with the Monarch of Truth. This allows him to pry into others' lies and secrets, asserting that everything he has said so far is 100% the truth and nothing else. Because of that, Kang hopes people will vote carefully and choose wisely. He also says that there are not just one or two lunatics among the players. He then points out Count Vladimir is one of them. The Count did not expect this, but claims to know nothing of what the protagonist is talking about. Khan comments that it's strange, as the Count himself mentioned reviving the Empire. Vladimir tries to stop Kang from talking any further, but this only motivates the protagonist more, who continues to expose all the Count's dirty laundry. He even taunts him, saying, "If something annoys you, Vladimir, wait for your turn to show off your magic." With that, the Count says, "I won't continue tolerating this humiliation with my parents and my respective president watching." The protagonist responds, "Vladimir, you're a devout man, even though you have a fire attribute." Then he goes on to attack Lieutenant General Kilgore, claiming you also like to play with fire, referring to your habit of throwing bombs at enemy countries, including carrying this out in secret. Kilgore gets nervous and asks the protagonist, "Do you realize the consequences your words will have?" Kang responds affirmatively, claiming for heroes that save the world, a nationalist lunatic like the Greykeeper, an imperialist like Count Vladimir, and a war fanatic like Kilgore are nothing more than opportunists. I think people won't be happy to hear this. Nevertheless, Kilgore tries to attack him, but Kang defends himself and asks, "What is the meaning of this?" Kilgore asks the protagonist, "Are you underestimating me?" Little does he know what is to come, because Kang wants to show him the best fighter jets. The girls say, "This crazy man is trying to kill him too." The general uses his exclusive ability named Fit Entre Diablo, but is surprised to see that the protagonist did the same. He asks, "How were you able to copy that?" The protagonist simply replies, "This ability is not so exclusive after all." Bilmir steps forward and asks, does the Hero King think he will be okay after slandering and attacking the honor of his comrades? Kang asks, "Do you consider me a comrade?" He questions, "How can comrades ally themselves and then try to stab me in the back at the first opportunity?" The Greykeeper claims, "It's a misunderstanding." However, Kang disagrees, stating, "I made a contract with the Monarch of Truth, so I know all your secrets. You've been doing whatever you want for a long time, but now that you're on camera, you're suddenly bothered. Why are you worried? It's not typical of you. I will continue speaking the truth. But now everyone already knows that the world won't change a thing." Bilmir asks, "Is the Hero King going to blame the world like a spoiled child?" Kang replies, "I indeed am a child and can't deal with old men." Such attitudes greatly please the Clown Monarch, who grants the protagonist a wish. Then he witnesses the manifestation of the celestial demon. The Gravekeeper wonders what the protagonist is trying to do. Meanwhile, Kang knows that his wish has been granted and is about to be fulfilled. The masked man says, "Your time is up. Now it's time for another hero to give a speech. Everyone deserves a chance." So, Rhodia steps forward, claiming, "I also have something to say to the watching public." Then the masked man changes the setting and says, "You can speak freely." The protagonist finds the setting she chose odd, but the saint tells him to stop talking because it's her turn now. Kane does not back down and calls her darling to provoke her a little. Rhodia then says, "At this moment, I will show the world what the Hero King truly is." This sentence is indeed striking, and all the audience becomes anxious, including the protagonist, Kang, using himself. He tries in a way to interfere, but Rhodia retorts with a provocation, asking the darling, "What's the matter?" Kang asks, "Is it too late to apologize?" After her speech, the tower is complete, and the vote results are about to be announced. The protagonist checks the data and wonders what the problem with these votes is until he realizes they were manipulated. But he does not care much, since he has won what he believes to be his right. His system alerts him that he has obtained the manifestation of the celestial demon. With this, he now has all three divine relics, the mythological equipment, the title, and a new skill. Only 3 months have passed, and he hasn't even opened the mythological equipment Black Death, which he won after defeating the Pestilence Lord. Mythological skills and weapons cannot be equipped by those who are not qualified. If you fail the test, your attributes decrease or the player dies. Even the Red Guardian received a great penalty for losing the challenge once. But the protagonist has already tried this in the previous season. He thinks he can now equip what he won. He believes he can change his weapon later and that it would be an advantage to use his skill now. With that, he activates the manifestation of the Celestial Demon for the first time. And his system alerts that he will have to prove himself worthy. Soon, he is transported to another place. An old man stands in front of him, as he will be the one testing the protagonist's values. Kang says, "I'm here to make the deal. If it's the same as last season, it'll end quicker." The system alerts that the test has begun and that Kang must block 2 basic movements of the Celestial Demon. His opponent gets ready to attack, and the protagonist notices something strange. The adversary attacks with the Celestial Demon's triple sword on the first move. The blow is very fast, but Kang manages to defend, though with difficulty. Afterward, he says, this is quite exciting, confirming that he's been through this before. Then the opponent attacks again. Once more, Kang defends himself, but this time, the energy generated by the impact is much greater. The opponent feels it on his skin. The adversary sheds his sword, realizing that the protagonist now has a new title. Kang asks, "Are you referring to the title of Monarch Slayer?" The old man asks if the protagonist indeed earned that title. Kang answers, yes. And now that the test is over, he asks if the old man will appear every time he is summoned. The old man is still digesting the previous information. Kang asked if he is bothered by anything. However, the old man simply says, "I like you, Kang." Then the scenario begins to move. Kang questions why that's happening, but his opponent does not respond. The old man advances, telling Kang to show how to use a sword. They start to fight again, but the protagonist doesn't understand why, since he thought the test had ended. The elder does not stop fighting. Kane begs him to stop, claiming that if it continues, it will end up killing him. However, the old man says, "Your sword is still enchanted. Did you use it to kill a monarch? If that's the case, I won't recognize you as the winner." Kang asks, "How can I defeat the Celestial Demon with my abilities?" He adds, "If it were possible, I would be using that sword and wouldn't have made the journey asked for greater power." The old man seems to agree with that, which surprises the protagonist. Then the Celestial Demon says, "I will test you in another way." He stomps on the ground so hard that it causes another earthquake. After that, he goes back to the fight, but this time, he fights hand to hand. Kane does not understand why the old man is going so far and at least wants to know the reason. Soon, the opponent reveals that he is doing this because the protagonist killed a monarch. He claims that the answer Kane is searching for might lie within Kang Yoosung himself. The protagonist is quite scared, but the Celestial Demon gives him no time to process, using his triple sword and challenging him to try and stop it. Kang is still disoriented by everything and finds himself in a situation he was not prepared for. He is confused after being attacked, yet he doesn't see any injury or signs of an attack. He doesn't even ask what his opponent cut. The Celestial Demon says, "I spent my life wandering through the lands of the world, searching for the supreme fighter who would defeat me. But no matter how far I went, I never experienced defeat all the way to the end. I could never understand the meaning of losing, not even when I stared death in the face." The Reaper went after him, yet the Celestial Demon couldn't find someone capable of finally defeating him. He wondered if such a person even existed. All of them masters from countries, empires, and even God's Reaper all lost their value against his sword. That's when he realized that all of this was useless against the Celestial Demon sword. But this is his first time meeting a mortal who killed the monarch. This made him wonder if the protagonist was different from the others, or if he was just another one who would be defeated easily. He asks, what does this mean for Kang? Such words provoke a reflection in the protagonist's mind. His life is recapitulated in his mind until he remembers the saint's speech in the tower. She said that Kang is kinder than one can imagine and has an unbelievably soft heart. She also said that he is a crybaby and a coward. Apart from being a ridiculously pampered child, when his companions died, when he discovered the sacrifices that took place when a raid failed, he cried nonstop for an entire week like a child. During this time, all the saint did was listen to his laments. Remembering this makes the protagonist become isolated. Then the Celestial Demon says that in the end, Kang will be able to give an answer. The protagonist asks, what answer does he want? The meaning of defeat, the meaning of death, or even the meaning of life. However, the Celestial Demon is surprised that Kang is still alive. Anyway, he continues remembering what the saint said. Regardless of everything, she asserted that Kang never gives up. No matter how painful or how scary it was, no matter how much he got hurt, he continued fighting for the sake of the world, even if none of this mattered in the end. Kang also says you can only break what exists, but not what does not exist. So Ming is not different. He asks, isn't this the principle of the triple sword? The celestial demon replies that he died a long time ago. Therefore, the celestial demon cannot defeat a Ming that does not exist. The demon cannot believe that the protagonist is saying he is at the same level as him. If Kang was someone who truly understood the lack of meaning, he could not be the hero king. He asks, are you just an idiot who goes around trying to protect something meaningless? Kang says, I am not doing this out of a sense of duty. What I do is meaningless. He continues, heroes save the world as much as they breathe and work hard defending the terrestrial plane, but the other side has all kinds of lunatics shooting at them. So he asks, what in the world would have less meaning than that? The celestial demon agrees, it is indeed futile. Therefore, he sheathes his sword and says, I can't wait for our next meeting. With that, the system alerts that Kang has been judged as a worthy player. He then goes home, thinking that it is fine anyway. He decides that's what a hero's life is like. His system alerts that he can now use the true manifestation of the celestial demon. But then, he falls to the ground, frightening his cat. Sometime later, he measures his temperature. Blackie asks, why are you so weak? Kang says, it's not weakness. My attributes are the best in the world. The cat then asks, why are you sick? Kang insists, I'm fine. I'm just angry about what they're saying about me on the internet. He claims, I need to complete an 8 or 9 tier tower to calm down. Blackie asks, how will you enter a tower that doesn't exist yet? Kang checks the calendar and realizes that it's still March. According to the past season, higher tier towers begin to appear, but it will take at least a month. Advanced tier towers do not exist in the territory of a universally larger country. As soon as they are unlocked, he will be able to enter immediately, similar to those games he plays. For now, he wants to visit a 7-tier tower, but his cat insists that Kang should stay put, saying it's the best choice for him at the moment. A little while later, the protagonist heads to a 3-tier tower. Upon arriving, he realizes it's very similar to the one he visited at the start of the season. He says, I'm not here for anything specific. I just need to clear my mind. Soon, he prepares to use his new ability, though he still thinks that the names given to abilities are usually meaningless. When he activates the manifestation of the celestial demon, he begins to feel a strange change within his body. His system warns that the presence of the celestial demon is influencing him. Kang's body gradually starts to shift, leaving him weakened and uneasy. Because of this, he blames the old man who gave him this power. The system alerts the vessel is complete. Adjustments will now be made. Still reeling from the sensation, Kang can hardly believe he has permanently obtained the celestial demon's power. The system announces, you have acquired the celestial demon bone blessing. He wonders, has this changed my entire body? Before long, he comes face to face with the bone transformation process. And apparently his transformation is only internal. It doesn't affect his exterior. Then the system warns that the collapse of the terrain connected him with the second floor. Because of this, several orcs appear and attack him. This was all the protagonist wanted. After all, he could finally test his new ability. After defeating them all, he realizes there is a third basic movement that wasn't included before. If the question is asked, does this blow not have a name because of its nonsensical nature? And why was the third move not included in the ancient skill? For a brief moment, he reflects on this void sword, the same one the celestial demon used against him once. Now, Kang also possesses this ability and wonders how much of it he will be able to use. He is about to find out as he comes across a gate and wants to enter when it opens. The synchronization rate stays at 1%. His system alerts that a merger with the Death Throne Monarch, the Sword Monarch, is happening, something Kang did not expect. The Lord of Penance tries to stop this ritual, according to the system. The protagonist wonders if the Celestial Demon was also a monarch. He remembers that the Celestial Demon said he was in search of the Supreme Fighter, who would give him a taste of defeat, and at that time, it was the first time he met a mortal who killed a monarch. Soon, Kang wonders if that was why the Celestial Demon acted that way, precisely because he killed someone like the Celestial Demon. After this reflection, his system alerts him that several monarchs are silently watching him. The Clown Monarch stares at him with an empty expression. Kang, on the other hand, is quite surprised. The clown asks, why are you so serious? For his part, the protagonist just goes through the gate saying, these monarchs are quite scary when they want to be. Regardless, he entered the boss room. It was time to face him. The boss tells the protagonist, provide me with an honorable battle, and then die. The protagonist's intention is just that, except for the part where he dies. With a single blow of his new skill, he breaks the boss into various pieces. Through this, he can witness the true power of the Celestial Demon. But then, he begins to feel pain afterward, and does not know exactly why. He wonders whether it is due to having exaggerated with such a skill. Kane realizes that his body still can't handle this ability. So, these different powers are intertwining until, all of a sudden, he hears the celestial demon say that there is nothing in this world that makes sense. He wonders if it's his memory. Either way, Kang thinks the origin of this power doesn't matter, since now the power belongs to him. He then uses his frozen sword, combined with the ability of the celestial demon, and in a way, manages to control it. Kang breathes a sigh of relief, saying he even finds this amusing. Upon returning to the real world, he calls Park and his friend and asks what he needs. Kang says he's getting so angry, he might end up moving to France. Park then asks the reason for the call. The protagonist says it's nothing special. He just wants a training partner. His friend asks, since when did the National Intelligence Agency become the lapdogs of the Hero King? Kang suggests changing the agency's name to Hero King and Co., but his friend isn't pleased. Enough of the beating around the bush, Park says, what are the conditions? Kang replies, the others can prepare as they wish. I'll only use one ability, the manifestation of the celestial demon, without secondary deck art, facts, or synergy. In addition, Blackie will stay out of the fight. Park asks, aren't you going to use the ice blacksmith or the other weapons? Kang responds, I'm about to equip them now. Soon, his friend becomes scared, but then the protagonist equips the weapon and shocks everyone with it. He is not only holding a different weapon, but also has a new look. Manager Park and the others are taken aback when they see this. When the protagonist equips the new weapons, acid drops to the floor, provoking astonishment, especially when he wields them with his new look. His friend, seeing this up close, asks, is this the power of the Lord of Pestilence? Park tries to talk to the protagonist, but receives no response. The manager starts getting worried and asks, did you pass the exam? Kang changes his posture and answers, yes, I would never fail something like this. Park and the others breathe a sigh of relief. They had been frightened by the protagonist's current state. These swords are from the Lord of Pestilence, called Black Death, and have quite strong attributes. After introducing them, the protagonist hurries the others, saying, besides this weapon and the descent from the celestial demon, he has nothing else. Park then wants his friend to promise one thing, that he won't give a cruel death to the boys. The protagonist agrees and says he will go easy. Upon entering, the protagonist stands in the middle of the arena, waiting to be attacked. He declares that he will begin as soon as the fireworks are launched, and they can start attacking as soon as they're ready. He trusts that the Assassins Department is quite skilled, because that is what makes the effort and teaching worthwhile. Immediately after they attack, but the protagonist doesn't stand still and retaliates, taking down several at once. Some prove to be more resilient than usual, and he doesn't let them get too close. Manager Park takes advantage of his distraction and attacks from a distance. Meanwhile, Kang is fighting with the others, but he's not that distracted since he sees his friend moving above. Park uses his Heart Crusher ability, but Kang says he won't fall for such a trick. The manager feels confident because he disappears shortly after, and Kiss are fired at the protagonist. He barely dodges them. However, the Kiss were actually tied by strong wires, which allowed other assassins to walk on. Kang is impressed with this tactic, but he doesn't hesitate to combat it. This ability is called Charlotte's Web, and whoever controls it knows exactly what they're doing. Soon after, some plates from the floor are lifted up by the webs. The protagonist realizes his opponents are trying to get closer. He decides to go up in the air, for he sees that some dark spikes have come out of the ground. He hasn't yet figured out whose web this is, so he decides to find and confront the one controlling it. Suddenly, he spots a girl and realizes it's Ha, their best disciple. However, she doesn't back down from the Hero King. She questions if he's really going to face her alone. Kang prepares his new daggers from afar. He uses their abilities, causing a huge energy release that strikes his opponents. The twin swords double their effect, he says. After this, he walks a bit in the air, even taking a moment to admire the damage he's done. On the ground, everyone is down, including Manager Park, who is shocked, thinking he's going to die for real. Kang then suggests they stop training. His friend agrees, saying they can't go on. He also mentions that Kang has completely destroyed the place and asks, have you ever thought about world domination? The protagonist asks, why the sudden conversation? Park responds, from my point of view, it'd be possible for the first Hero King. No one would be a match for him. But Kang cuts off the conversation, saying, we need to get out of here quickly. After leaving, the manager draws the others' attention. After all, they're down because they passed out after being defeated. With that, Park says, you can always count on us if you need to improve your skills again. The protagonist's system alerts him that the alternative history tower is calling him. Not only that, but Lieutenant General Kilgore is asking for his help. However, remembering their last encounter, a live broadcast fight, the protagonist thinks it's shameful of General Kilgore to ask for his help. But if he turns down the request and a tower break happens, it'd be worse. So he says, I'm warmed up and ready for action. His friend asks, do you really have to leave immediately? The protagonist responds, "Yes, I'm leaving for the United States of America right away." Hart doesn't like the idea of his friend leaving like that and wonders what kind of mess is going on in his head. Despite that, the protagonist heads to the tower and looks for Kilgore. He doesn't stop until he finds the general, who's super nervous about something. Kim approaches and asks, "Since when have you been so interested in the world inside the towers?" Kilgore is startled to see the protagonist and wonders, "How did you get here?" "I'm sure this tower isn't connected to South Korea." However, the protagonist asks, "How can you say that after begging for help?" Kilgore denies it, saying, "I would never ask for help from someone like Kang." Immediately, the protagonist realizes he was tricked by his monarch. He says, "I made a mistake," and apologizes, but adds, "Either way, since I'm already here, I offer to do something for the general." Then his system alerts him, saying that those who are armed and fighting against the enemies of freedom are looking for a chance. In this way, Kilgore thanks the protagonist for offering to help after all, even if it is a world inside the tower. As someone who grew up in a nation of freedom to the end, he believes that forgiveness is not an option. He also says, "I have no doubt that Kang is a good player, and just this time, I will join him." The protagonist replies, "In moments like this, Kilgore will cooperate quietly, but know that, in truth, he is torn in the face of global destruction." He asserts, "This could be good." However, he claims that in the face of a tyrant, everyone suddenly unites for a good cause. Kang speaks as someone who abhors imperialism. The general walked hand in hand with a gravedigger outside the tower, but Kilgore doesn't like hearing this provocation. However, the protagonist states that despite loathing the gravedigger, the fact that Kilgore joined him means that Kang incites fear in the general. Then he declares, "If you dare betray me one more time, there will be no forgiveness." Thus, the two of them head into the mission together, and the people there see the players as deities. Kang immerses himself in character, while the general demands that these men reveal their affiliation. Their captain introduces himself to the players, claiming to be Lieutenant Aldo Pitt, the current commander of a unit known as the Bastards, part of the domestic forces of the nation of Kitten from the Free Alliance. In turn, Kang wonders how they got here and not at a military camp. Kilgore takes over the conversation and asks about the current situation. Aldo replies, "The damned P Empire has surrounded our base." The protagonist says this was to be expected. After all, we are in the midst of enemy territory. Looking outside, he is surprised by the fact that the enemies are not necromancers. Aldo says that necromancers are the majority of elite troops, so they place themselves right in the middle. These guys are not messing around. Kilgore states the enemies can take their sweet time, for they have a mission to fulfill: put an end to all enemies. This goal excites the general greatly, and he declares, "I will now explain the plan to my allies." Kilgore says, "We will go out and kill every damned enemy that crosses our path." He also orders them to show no sympathy or mercy towards the enemy. With that, they go out determined for the fight. The elite squad from the Pesty Empire is surrounding the field. The general joins his team, but the men are surprised to see him fighting with a shield. Kilgore tells him to follow him, stating, "The shield will protect us." And so they do, proclaiming that they are fighting for freedom. Ironically, the protagonist says it feels great to be free, but he only watches the general and the others in action. They massacred the enemy army. From atop a building, Kang spots something suspicious. He goes to check it out and defeats the snipers in position. On the ground, Kilgore does his job, taking care of soldiers, and sees that Kang is providing air support while he and the others fight on the ground. The protagonist goes from rooftop to rooftop, taking out the snipers until Kilgore approaches him. Kilgore tells him, "I warned you to defeat the enemies ruthlessly." Kang responds, "For me, it's enough if they're dead." But the general disagrees. "No," he says, "each of the enemy soldiers must suffer." He continues, "I want to ensure that the soldiers in the field have a brutal death, so the others who are still alive know who they're dealing with, because then terror will take over the rest." The protagonist smirks and says, "You sound like you stepped out of a movie." Immediately afterwards, an enemy air invasion starts. His allies are terrified by this sight, unlike the general, who calmly declares, "I'll show them true air power." Kilgore then uses his summoning skills, the same ones he used against Kang in the tower, and summons his F-23s, named Diablo. With this, an intense air battle begins. But the enemy jets don't stand a chance. The F-23s obliterate all of them, and the allies celebrate the victory. They thank the general for the victory, saying it was thanks to the players. Kilgore, however, reminds them, "Remember what I need to do to maintain peace." For his part, the protagonist thinks this is all nonsense, but the general insists that war brings peace. Kang disagrees and says that to find peace, they should not fight. Even so, the general is adamant. Either way, the Continental Conquest Tower was cleansed. On the other side, a player stands before the enemies. The gravedigger, who has been involved all this time, says that his work is now done. But to truly materialize his ideology, he asks the immortal monarch to delay this moment in history. His monarch allows a moment of self-indulgence. And with the monarch's blessing, the gravedigger's return is delayed. Soon, he says he will prove his loyalty to the monarch. The general insists that to find peace, it's necessary to start the wars before the enemies. With this, he carries out more attacks at the location. However, the protagonist wonders if this isn't alley territory. Either way, they move, and Kilgar mentions how he loves the smell of napalm in the morning. Kang says that the whole place reeks of gasoline, but the general retorts that that's exactly what he's referring to. He says this is the smell of victory. However, the protagonist finds this quite pathetic. Kilgar asks, Lieutenant Aldo Pitt, where the enemy command base is? Kilgar asks. Aldo answers, currently it's in the PHI Empire, located in the nation of Kitten, in a skyscraper within the city of White York. Kilgar frowns. Has the heart of the Alliance become an enemy command base? Aldo nods. Yes, and even the Crest of Liberty has been replaced with their Governor-General statue. Hearing this, the general's anger boils over. I'll throw down that statue myself, he declares. But as they move forward, they hit a roadblock. The 3rd Occultist Battalion of the Poi Empire's elite team is ready for an ambush. Kane steps forward, taking the lead. I'll handle this, he says, his voice steady. Kilgar looks around and says, we'll take a detour and head straight for the enemy command base. But the Necromancers block their path. Who will let you leave so easily, they warn. The protagonist sees the situation unfolding and calls for Blackie's aid in battle. The cat yawns lazily. I don't want to devour these zombies. They taste kind of bland. Kang's eyes narrow as he observes they're detainees from the detention center, transformed into the undead. Now he understands why their teeth gnash in such a way. Why are there so many madmen in this world? He mutters to himself. Blackie flicks an ear. You're not in any position to say anything, the cat retorts, and asks if what the protagonist does is any different from what they do. For his part, Kang attempts to argue, alleging they are different things, but Blackie says humans make their lives more complicated. Kane agrees that humans indeed are different. Either way, he decides to take this on by himself and attacks the zombies alone. With this, his system alerts that a zombie fungus has been applied to his weapon. He continues attacking all the undead until those struck by Kane turn against their leaders and shoot the very necromancers who summoned them. The cultists try to retreat and shield themselves from this attack, but end up being devoured by their own undead. Kang merely observes them being beaten until someone approaches and asks if he finally understands the power of necromancy. The mortician wonders who would believe all this mayhem was created by the Hero King. Kang says there's also an American general here. George Bilmer is the honorary leader here and doesn't like hearing about Kilgore's presence on his territory. However, he says to forget about it and draws attention to his uniform, boasting that even though it's different from those existing in the real world, it's still pretty cool. Yet the protagonist says the old man isn't acting his age and should stop these childish behaviors. He also says that the uniform resembles that of a terrorist. The mortician notices that the protagonist has the powers of the celestial demon, but claims he can't lose to him. Soon, he assumes the posture of the Lord of the Grave. Kang asks, when did a CEO, who is always busy running his company, get a legendary ability? The old man has the same question, since he sees the Hero King with the lamp of the Lord of Pestilence. He asserts that the protagonist isn't a common celestial demon descendant. He also says, I am the one who should have gotten this magic lamp. Getting ready to start the fight, the protagonist switches to his secondary deck and replaces Waking the Dead with Ice Smith. Jerk asks, do you think you don't need the power of a monarch to face me? Kang responds, there's no point in fighting a necromancer with necromancy abilities. Soon the old man says, during the time we were apart, the Hero King's tongue became quite sharp. Knowing the fight is being watched by several monarchs, they begin. The poison the protagonist used on the zombies is deactivated because the old man's power is consuming everything. He says ashes are destined to return to ashes, while using an army of skeletons to attack. The protagonist enables his ability and equips the darkness. Your system alerts that Kang's evasion and dexterity have drastically increased. Jerk knows he is facing an adversary resistant to darkness. He also knows that these skeletons are not very strong and asserts he can see everything from where he is. He contends that necromancers are not bad at close range. However, while attacking, he realizes that Kang used an illusion spell, but the ice sword is real. Kang says what the old man sees is not everything. Kang thought that the gravedigger trusted invisible entities and wants to test how true that is. The old man gets annoyed with this and wonders, why, of all people, did I have to beat the Hero King? He thinks it's vanity to lose an opportunity so hard to come by and believes that next time he will guarantee his victory. However, he is overcome by an unusual feeling. Soon, he concludes that there may not be a next time. He has doubts because a player cannot definitively kill another player within a tower, but the doubt consumes him. The old man screams in despair. His system alerts that the immortal monarch has rushed York's exit to the outside world. On the other hand, the protagonist mocks the defeated monarch. The reputation of the immortal monarch, among others, has dropped significantly, and Kang savors the satisfaction of the other monarchs. The protagonist's system alerts him that he has cleared the alternate history of the tower and was granted the accessory called Executioner's Pledge. Sometime later, he returns home, and the news of his deeds has already spread. Kang gives an interview with the general, claiming that he couldn't refuse a call for help from someone so important. He also takes the opportunity to send a message to Jerk, asking if he saw help from anyone to compete against the Hero King. On the other hand, Jor watches these provocations and becomes furious. He orders his assistant to send a message to Mr. Lee, whom he spoke with earlier, because he will soon need to visit South Korea. Back at the interview, Kilwar tells Kang to stop talking. Kang apologizes, explaining that he has this habit of not staying quiet in front of the cameras. He adds that the reporters also want to hear from the general. The general then speaks, stating, "As a patriot, I have only one thing to say: country above everything and God above all." Kang never misses an opportunity to provoke him, until some men approach him and invite him to go with them. Soon, the protagonist deduces that they must be from the CIA. They then show their credentials. Kang asks, "Is it real?" Kilber confirms it. Kang says, "Our lives depend on confidentiality. Is it okay to reveal your identities so easily?" The agent tells the protagonist, "Don't cause any more trouble. Cooperate with us." But Kang refuses, replying, "My boss told me not to follow strangers." He adds, "I'd rather follow Kilber than the CIA." However, the protagonist is seized by the agents and taken by force. Kilber says this is only to ensure your safety and tries to calm the press, which ends up seeing everything. The image of Kang being captured circulates around the whole world. As soon as Park sees this, he tells his assistant, "Track the protagonist immediately." He tries to call Kang's phone, but can't get through. The protagonist is taken to a CIA safe house in New York City. One of the agents says, "We're preparing a private VIP jet for you by tomorrow." Kang asks, "Is this necessary?" Another agent responds, "We're already in March, and if you use a commercial airplane, people could be exposed to terrorist attacks." The protagonist suggests going to a tower that leads to Korea, but the agents say they haven't found any capable of doing that in the US. However, they found one that leads to North Korea, but going there could start a war. Kang then asked for time to sleep until the flight time, but as soon as he closes his eyes to sleep, the agents freak out. The protagonist asks, "What's the problem this time?" One of the agents says that something strange is happening with this incident, and headquarters has authorized the release of this information to Kang. He then hands over the details for him to see for himself. With his phone in hand, the protagonist is horrified by what he sees, as the scene is similar to a horror movie. The agent says this happened in East Harlem, about 3 kilometers from there. About 4 hours after Kang completed that tower, and upon examining the car left at the crime scene, Kang realizes that the face collector has appeared again, but he wonders why it had to be now. And right there where he is, the protagonist presumes this to be an attack meant to provoke him until he gets up, and the agents become worried. Kang says he's going to teach this guy a lesson. He tells the agents not to stand still and to go with him to show the location, since the great CIA managed to find the whereabouts of this psychopath quickly. In the heart of the Big Apple, the murderer known as the Face Collector is doing what he does best, and the Mirror Monarch expresses his gratitude. With that, the psychopath assumes the face of a woman. He receives an order stating that the time has come and no mistake must be made. Soon, he tells the person named M that he understands. The Mirror Monarch encourages the player, claiming he can become whatever he wants, even the King Hero. Speaking of him, the protagonist analyzes the powers of the Abyss. There are players who deliberately don't use equipment or skill cards and hide their names on the leaderboard. These players, who exist in the Abyss of the Rankless Kingdom, are called Abyss Powers. They are intelligence agents from various countries who need to hide their identities, special operations forces, or criminal players waiting for a chance to commit more crimes. The Collector is one of those famous for killing many from the Heavenly Kingdom. Kang thinks that if he knew they would meet this way, he would have asked that woman for more details. It seems he is the reason they called the protagonist to the tower connected with the USA to put Kang and the Collector in the same place. After some time, they arrive at the location. The protagonist walks through the streets and realizes that the agents have blocked the entire area. He knows right off the bat that the killer is not there. He arrives at the photo location and says he doesn't know why he's there since he's not a detective. He's just someone in charge of fighting. However, one of the agents feels that he should show something to Kang until he puts his skin on a sliced face. Soon, that body stands up. Not only that one, but all the others as well. Kang asks this man what he's trying to do. He asks what the protagonist thinks. Several start to put the skins on their faces, and the man says that this was a trap to catch the king hero. However, the protagonist was already expecting something like this. He begins to prepare for a fight and says that the king hero's specialty is precisely running right into a trap.